Hey, I'm not Dan. I'm just Zach, and I am your fiery friend. And this is episode 16 of the podcast, and it's good to be back with y'all today. I'm actually recording on a Tuesday today, which is different than ordinary Fridays with the Dan. But as you guys would have heard on our last podcast, Dan is on a trip right now. He was originally going to go to Colorado for this next week, but now he's out going to IHOP and to Upper Room in Texas. So he's about to have an awesome journey out there with his girlfriend Ellie. But I'm here this week, and if you guys have been listening to the show lately, you guys know that I've been in the process of watching all 59 movies of the Disney animated canon. And you don't just watch all 59 movies of the Disney animated canon in a month and not share your findings, your results, and rank the movies up against each other. So that's what I'm here to do today. I've had a really good time watching all of these movies. Okay, maybe not all of them. Some of them were a bit of a slog to get through, to be completely honest. Disney is known for its masterpieces, but it also has a lot of stuff in the deep, dark Disney abyss that I have discovered along the way here. So I'm excited to share with you guys kind of just what I've found through watching all 59 movies. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to do today. I'm also thinking about making a YouTube version of this with visuals of the movies. So if that ends up happening, I'll probably put a link in the description of the podcast. Otherwise, it'll just be audio. So, in order to rank these 59 Disney movies, I ended up rating every movie on 10 different categories. The categories were emotional pull, how much they pulled me emotionally, the widespread appeal, so how much it would appeal to a widespread group of people, the entertainment value and the engagement level. So were there moments where I was just completely engaged, or were there moments where I was getting sucked out of the action? Personal relatability and applicability. So that's like, how does it personally connect with me, and also the moral implications of it. Then there was also a category for historical value. If it was a movie that had a big historical impact in Disney's history, then it got a little extra points. I also included a category for soundtrack and songs. So movies that had really good soundtracks got a little bit of a boost. I had a category for moments and quotes. I had a category for characters. I had a category for the plot and the storyline. And then I had a category for the animation and the art style. I think that's all 10 of them. So I rated each movie in those 10 categories, came up with final scores, and then I rated the movies against each other as well. And then we came up with these rankings, which were pretty good. So I have divided the movies into 8 different tiers, kind of based on what scores they ended up with at the end. So the bottom tier is called unwatchable. These are Disney movies that are just so bad that I would not recommend watching them in any capacity. Then the next tier is bad, followed by all right, respectable, which are movies that I respect. I wouldn't necessarily call them good, but I think I respect them for their historical significance or for some other reason. Then there's the good but something missing tier. So these are movies that I see as good movies, but there's something missing that's keeping them from that next level. Then we have great movies, amazing movies, and then masterpiece is the final tier. So those 8 tiers is how I'm going to divide up the 59 movies of the Disney animated canon. And then one other thing I did with each movie is I looked at the cast of the movie and the characters, and I decided on each movie one character that was the most valuable player, or the MVP. And whoever I chose as the MVP, I'm also going to mention as I go through each film. And I also ranked the MVPs from 1 to 59, so I'll tell you what level the MVP got. Because sometimes the MVP is different than the movie. Like a movie might have a really good character, but it's like lacking in animation or plot, so the movie overall might end lower, but the character could end higher. So yeah, so I'll explain both of that as we go, but without further ado, let's jump on in, because I'm excited to rank these Disney movies. So here we go. Number 59 is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So Ichabod and Mr. Toad for me was such a disappointment. Like I went into so Ichabod and Mr. Toad came out during the wartime era of Disney, which is a really bad era of Disney, generally speaking. Like, because most of these movies had a very poor budget. A lot of them are just kind of compilation films of random different sequences that don't have anything to do with each other. But Ichabod and Mr. Toad actually has two cohesive stories, and it's the last one from that era. So I was like, okay, maybe they've improved, maybe they've got better. No, I really hate Ichabod and Mr. Toad with a passion. The first story is just this mystery story about a toad getting unfairly arrested or something. And the second one's about this awkward dude named Ichabod who lives in a little town. I think he's a teacher, but I don't fully remember. But both of these characters were just so unbearably annoying to me, and the entire cast surrounding each of them, to the point where I just was not invested in this movie at all, and I preferred like the other random nonsense movies in the era that had almost nothing to offer. So my most valuable player for this movie was Ichabod. I think his story was a little better than Mr. Toad's, but he's also number 59. So yeah, so Ichabod and Mr. Toad, worst movie, and Ichabod is the worst, most valuable player. So there you go. Not a fan. Then we move on to number 58, which is Saludos Amigos. And this is the only other movie in my unwatchable tier. So those are the worst two movies. Every other movie got at least a bad rating, which is still not a good rating, but it's not unwatchable. But Saludos Amigos is actually Disney's shortest film of all time. And while Ichabod and Mr. Toad is the last film of the wartime era, Saludos Amigos is the first. And it's the shortest film that Disney's ever made. It's only 42 minutes long. But just because it's short doesn't make it any less painful to sit through, because it's basically just a documentary about Latin American history, and it doesn't do it well. It just gives you like really random segments. Like there's one scene with like Goofy wearing a bunch of Hispanic clothes, and Donald Duck, I think, rides a llama for one sequence or something. I don't even really remember that much. But it's just very unengaging, uninteresting, all over the place, and kind of just leaves you not really wanting that much more. But my most valuable player from this movie is actually this guy named Pedro the Plane. So they do have one sequence where this little plane named Pedro is flying over the mountainside to deliver the mail. And that's probably my favorite sequence in the movie. And I actually gave Pedro 53rd place in the most valuable player rankings. So, and he landed in the bad tier for most valuable players. So he wasn't an unwatchable MVP, but the movie as a whole, pretty unwatchable. So there we go. That's our bottom tier, unwatchable. So now we're into the bad tier, where we have 10 movies. 10 movies in the bad tier here. Starting with number 57, which is Dinosaur. Dinosaur released in 2000, and it was one of Disney's first ever CG films. It's filmed like with live action looking dinosaurs in these like live action backgrounds. And to be honest, the kind of looks pretty terrible. Just because the characters don't really emote very well. They don't engage you. The part of the movie I really do like is I like when they have like the big meteor shower at the beginning, because it's very impressive animation wise, and it also kind of emotionally gets you more than anything else as the movie goes on. But this is one of the movies where I was struggling to stay awake, falling asleep pretty often throughout. And yeah, overall, just not a good film. The person I chose for the MVP for this film was Zini, which was just one of the monkey characters. At the beginning of the movie, he's just kind of trying to find a mate because it's like monkey mating season. So they have Zini trying to find his girlfriend along with all the other monkeys, and like every other monkey finds a pair except for Zini. So that just kind of felt funny to me, because like I kind of relate to that idea of like, you know, all my friends finding their mate and I'm still just hanging out. So that was why I gave him MVP, but I still consider him like the second worst MVP. He's number 58 in the MVP rankings, because I didn't even remember his name until I looked it up on the Disney wiki. So yeah, so not a good most valuable player, but I related to him on a small level, so he got better than Ichabod. So there you go. That's number 57. Then we got number 56 is Make Mine Music. Now, the funny thing about Make Mine Music is it's actually the only Disney film that isn't on Disney Plus. So I actually had to look it up online on some other website to watch this one. But Make Mine Music is another film from the wartime era, which is pretty universally one of the worst eras in Disney history. I think it did score the worst when I averaged out all the eras and how they performed in these rankings. So yeah, not great. But Make Mine Music, it's a compilation film. There's about 10 different sequences, but it's really all over the place. Some of them are like 2 minutes and some of them are like 15 minutes. So they're so unbalanced that it doesn't really turn out that well. My favorite sequence of the movie is the last one, but you have to sit through all this boring stuff to get there. However, when you get there, it's really fun because there's this giant singing whale, and he has a really fun storyline where eventually he dies and goes to heaven at the end, and you kind of get an emotional tug from that when he dies. But yeah, so Willie the Whale was my MVP here, and I actually really like Willie the Whale. He's my I have him at 43 in the character rankings for the most valuable players. But even still, like, he's only in like that last segment of the movie, and the rest of the movie is so jumbled that it still ends up landing at 56 in my all-time movie rankings. So that is Make Mine Music. Next up, we have number 55, which is Home on the Range. This movie, I think, has the lowest rating on IMDb of any of the 59 Disney movies. It only has like a 5.4, which is pretty bad for a Disney film. And Home on the Range, it almost killed 2D animation for Disney too. There aren't very many 2D animated Disney films after this one because of how badly it performed. It's basically just a movie about a bunch of cows trying to save their farm, going across the world. And it's really boring. All three of the lead characters are just really not that interesting and borderline annoying for two of the three. But one of the cows I did end up making my most valuable player for this movie, in Grace. It was between her and the yodeling guy, which I actually really liked the yodeling guy as a villain too. But he wasn't really that interesting or engaging. Grace was at least like the nicest of the three cows. So she ended up getting 54 in my most valuable player rankings. But yeah, overall, Home on the Range, not really a movie I'd recommend. It got the lowest score for a reason. It's just a bunch of annoying cows bickering for most of the film. Not one I would recommend. Still in that bad tier. So then we move on to number 54, which is Fun and Fancy Free. Another movie from the wartime era. Anybody surprised? No, not at all. So Fun and Fancy Free it's actually very similar to Ichabod and Mr. Toad in that it only has two stories, except unlike Ichabod and Mr. Toad, the stories are actually pretty good. So the first, and by pretty good I mean not terrible, because it's still in the bad tier. But the two stories are, there's one about this circus bear named Banjo who just goes out in the wilderness and finds love. It's fine. It's not really that engaging. And the second one is about Mickey and the Beanstalk, which is what is more well known for. It's just Mickey, Donald, and Goofy climbing a giant beanstalk and trying to escape from the giant. It's just like a parody of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it's fine for what it is. It's not very creative, just copying a story that's just been a fairy tale for so long and doesn't really get you in. And the animation in this movie is terrible. And what really brings it down for me is just there's these really weird live action puppet sequences where they have freaking puppets just like commenting on the story as it happens, and it's just super out of place and unfitting, and it's just really off-putting. But that said, Mickey Mouse is an MVP. This is pretty much the movie that Mickey Mouse stars in, besides Fantasia, which we'll get to later. And because Mickey Mouse stars in this movie, I did decide to give him at least one MVP. He's the face of all Disney. So I have him as the 42nd best, most valuable player, because he's fine. Mickey and the Beanstalk, it's not like he's like super relatable or anything, so he doesn't land that high, but he lands in that respectable tier for most valuable players at 42. So there we go. Then next up, we have number 53, Atlantis, the Lost Empire. Now, this is going to be a controversial one for some, because I know there's like this really niche crowd of people who really loves Atlantis, and that's why I was so excited to watch it, because because going into these movies, I'd heard so many good things about Atlantis from people who are like super excited about it, like on the online communities. People say, "Oh, Atlantis is one of the most underrated Disney films. You're gonna love it." So I went into it with this mindset of like expecting it to be super good, and it was garbage, guys. It was really bad. It was terrible. I don't understand the hype for Atlantis at all. The animation is really lame. The characters just don't. I don't get invested in Milo or in Kita, the princess. The villains just. It's so uninteresting to me. There's way too many characters, and none of them get good enough development to where you even like remember most of their names by the end. It's so not good. The pacing feels off. There's so many issues I could say with this movie, and I really did not enjoy it. I ended up giving Milo 55th place in the most valuable player rankings, even below Grace from Home on the Range, because like even as the protagonist, like you just don't care about him. Like it's just this super nerd who's just trying to discover something that shouldn't exist. Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense. You don't really care about him. You're not invested. At least I'm not. Maybe you're a fan of Atlantis. I don't get it, though. I really don't. So it lands in my number 53. Still in that bad tier. Then we have number 52. Just an inch ahead of Atlantis. We have The Sword in the Stone. This comes from Disney's Transition Age. Right around the time between the Silver Era and the Dark Age. So this was like right before the Dark Age, but it was pretty much just as bad as the Dark Age movies. In fact, I think I have it lower here than any of the Dark Age movies, because The Sword in the Stone is terrible. It's just about this wizard guy trying to teach King Arthur how to engage in different areas of life. So he like turns him into different animals to get different perspectives. He gets turned into a squirrel, into a bird, into a fish. It's really random. The sequences don't really go together that well. The best part of the movie is probably the magic battle at the end. Or I also really do like the squirrel sequence, because like he ends up falling in love with this female squirrel, and the female squirrel was almost my most valuable player for this movie. I almost made the MVP the female squirrel, and really I probably should have in retrospect, because I ended up going with Arthur as the MVP, just the main protagonist, but he's still super boring, and I put him in unwatchable for the most valuable players at number 57. Because Merlin is just super annoying, the freaking wizard guy, and the female squirrel, even though I almost picked her, she was only in the movie for like 5 minutes, so I don't think I couldn't really justify her as the most valuable player here. So it's just like, it's a movie where the characters really, really hurt it. The storyline could have actually worked better if the characters weren't so annoying or uninteresting. But yeah, overall, number 52 in my rankings. Then we move to number 51, which is Chicken Little. And I'm actually surprised Chicken Little ended up this high. It's almost at the top of my bottom 10. It's the 9th worst Disney movie. But Chicken Little came out around 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. It was also one of Disney's first like 3D animated films, and it really shows. I'm actually watching Chicken Little. It feels a lot more like a DreamWorks movie in the quality of it. Just has like a lot more weird pop songs. The animation is more like janky, and it just doesn't have that Disney feel that you expect from a Disney film. The characters are also really annoying, and it gets really dark at a lot of different points where Chicken Little is just kind of getting bullied, and it's just really not fun. And then it's just like, it goes all over the place, from like Chicken Little like wanting to play baseball to prove that he's not a loser after he says the sky is falling, and then like aliens start coming, and so he has to try and justify the sky falling and aliens, and it's just like, it's too many different things going on at once. I do think this movie had a lot of potential, though. I think it had more potential than any movie we talked about so far. I actually think this could have been a good movie if Disney didn't handle it so badly, if the animation wasn't so terrible, and if the side characters weren't so bad, because I really don't like that fat pig or the little duck girl who is Chicken Little's like love interest, because I think it's just a really bad cast of characters. I ended up going with Chicken Little as the MVP, but he's only 56 in the MVP rankings, so really bad most valuable player. Not a fan at all. So yeah, overall, Chicken Little, it's a movie I think had some potential to be a little better, but because it wasn't capitalized on and it was done so poorly, lands at number 51. So next up we have number 50. This is the last of my bottom 10 movies. Wait, no, is it? Let me count it out here. Yeah, last of the bottom 10 is number 50, The Aristocats. So The Aristocats is interesting because I think The Aristocats could maybe have been a better movie if it happened before some of these other movies. So The Aristocats is a movie that I really don't hate that much, but when you compare it to what came before it, it looks really bad. So Aristocats was actually the first movie of the Disney Dark Age. And it followed two other movies that we'll see later on this list, in Lady and the Tramp and 101 Dalmatians. And I think the problem with Aristocats is it basically just rips off both of those two movies and does both of them worse. So Lady and the Tramp is a movie about two two animals falling in love, one rich and one poor, which is basically what this movie is, between the female cat lead and then Thomas O'Malley cat falling in love. So it's very similar to Lady and the Tramp that way. And then 101 Dalmatians is like a movie where eventually it becomes a movie about trying to get home, like all these animals getting lost and trying to get home again. And that is, again, what happens in Aristocats. But I think, again, those other two movies do both of those ideas better than Aristocats does. Also, the animation in Aristocats and the characters are not as interesting to me. So because of those reasons, I think it ends up as a bad film because it just feels like it ripped off the plot ideas of two movies that came before it and did it better, with the dogs. So these cats just really don't get your attention. It's also just harder to relate to a bunch of rich cats getting lost because it's just like, why do I care about you getting lost? You're just a bunch of rich cats. Versus like in 101 Dalmatians, which we'll get to later, I relate a lot more to the characters because they come from a poor family of just like these nice, humble people. But here it's just like, these rich snobs lose their cats, and it's like, why do I care about these cats getting back home when their parents are rich snobs? Like, it's not as interesting. So number 50 is Aristocats. My most valuable player here was Scat Cat, who actually also lands at number 50 in the MVP rankings in the alright tier. I think he's an okay character, but they don't really bring Scat Cat in until like the last act of the film. It's very late in the movie that he shows up. So overall, not one of my favorites. So then we move on to number 49, which is Fantasia, a movie of the Disney Golden Age, one of the first five. And a lot of people really like Fantasia, and let me just say, I don't get it. I don't understand what people like about this movie. My mom also doesn't get it. Like, she always says, like, it was the movie she watched in her childhood that was, like, it's so boring, is basically, like, her takeaway from Fantasia. And I'm right there with it. Like, the thing is, like, Fantasia, it's a movie where they have, like, a bunch of different musical sequences, and I actually, like, the thing I say after I finished watching Fantasia is it's a great movie to fall asleep to, because the whole movie is just music. And, like, whenever I go to, like, an orchestra concert, like, I would go to my friend Mari's orchestra concerts back in high school, and, like, the best way to engage with, like, an orchestra concert is to close your eyes and to imagine stuff. So I think that Fantasia would be a great movie to do that with. However, you don't go to the movies to close your eyes and to listen. You go to the movies to watch something unfold on the screen. And I think overall in Fantasia, there's just not that much to watch. All the sequences feel very unrelated, in my opinion. Some of them are okay, like The Sorcerer's Apprentice is always like the famous one. And I actually really like the more like Greek mythology Candyland one with all the ponies and stuff. And my most valuable player from Fantasia actually goes to this centurion guy named Brutus, which I didn't know his name either. I had to look it up on the Disney Wiki, but there's this one scene where like he's sitting under a tree, and then like he's like another blue centurion sitting under the tree, and they're both like lonely and don't have any friends, and then they like come together and become this. They're dancing together and stuff, and like that actually emotionally got me a little bit, like seeing the lonely centurion find a girlfriend. But I still didn't remember his name, so he still ends in the bad tier for most valuable players at number 51. Overall, this film, I don't get it. But I do understand why people maybe like have nostalgia for it if they've been longtime Disney fans. Another thing about this movie is it's the longest of all 59 movies, and it's the third one. And it's just like, at that point in history, Disney had no business making a 2-hour movie, because it just goes on forever and ever and ever. And you just are so bored. Like, after this movie, I was just like, please get me a movie with a story again, because I cannot handle sitting here. And some of the sequences literally have no story. Like, at the beginning of the film, the narrator goes, like, some of these pieces will be where music tells a story, and some of it will just be music for the sake of music. And it's like, if I wanted to listen for music for the sake of music, I wouldn't be watching a Disney movie, because that's not what a Disney movie is about. So it was a mess. But it is classic. It does have that legacy value. So it lands at number 49. And then finally, my last movie in the bad tier is going to number 48, The Great Mouse Detective. So The Great Mouse Detective is also a movie from the Disney Dark Age. And also, just to explain what the Disney Dark Age is, the Disney Dark Age is the period of 8 movies right after Walt Disney died. So he kind of lost influence over the studio, and a lot of those movies didn't earn as much money. Some of them are good movies, which we'll find later in the rankings. But yeah, so The Great Mouse Detective was near the end of that line. I think it's one of the more obscure Disney movies that just really gets forgotten. And I think rightfully so, honestly. This was another one I was excited to watch, just like Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I thought it had a lot of potential from what people were saying about it. Same for like Atlantis. Like, these are all movies I was like, maybe they'll be good based on what people say. But it wasn't good, guys. It was terrible. I will say the one thing that was pretty decent about this film, though, was Ratigan, the villain character. It was really interesting. I really love just like his big song where he's like, "Oh, Ratigan," or whatever. It's super fun, super lighthearted and interesting. And like that one scene where he literally like has his cat eat one of the people who calls him a rat is super dark. Like, you literally just see this dude get eaten. So that's kind of intense. But my biggest issue with this film is the protagonist, Basil, is so freaking annoying. Like, there is no part of me that wants him to win. Like, I'm rooting for Ratigan the entire movie, because Basil is just like this prideful, annoying detective that you just have no love for at all whatsoever. I just cannot stand Basil as a protagonist, and because of that, the movie lands here in the bad tier. But Ratigan actually landed pretty high on the MVP rankings as the 33rd best most valuable player in all the films. I really thought that he was a pretty good MVP. I have him in the good but something missing tier. And honestly, like, this movie could have really been good if Basil wasn't such a horrible, horrible protagonist. But there you go. So that's the bad tier. Those are the bad movies. Just like to go through them again. They are Dinosaur, Make Mine Music, Home on the Range, Fun and Fancy Free, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Sword in the Stone, Chicken Little, Aristocats, Fantasia, and The Great Mouse Detective. So those 10 plus the bottom 2 of Ichabod and Mr. Toad and Saludos Amigos leave us 12 movies down in bad and under. And that means that we have 47 to go that are at least all right or better. So this next tier is the all right tier. They're not quite in the respectable tier, but they're all right. They're fine. There's nothing super offendable about them, but they're still not at the point where I say that I would really respect them or that they're good. So the last movie in that tier is number 47, Fantasia 2000. So this is the remake of the original Fantasia, and most people prefer the original, probably because of nostalgia reasons. Personally, I really like the second one better, because the second one is, first of all, an hour shorter, so you're not sitting through it for as long, which is good. And I think the animation sequences in the second are a lot better as well. Specifically, I really like the scene with Donald Duck on Noah's Ark with Daisy, because it's really interesting. It's not the way that you would think they would do a Noah's Ark story, because it ends up being like this weird, like, pseudo love story where like Donald Duck and Daisy Duck are both on the ark, but they think the other person got killed in the flood and isn't on the ark, and they just keep like cutting between them. And it's really interesting, just like seeing them both sad, like thinking the other person didn't survive, and then at the end, like they both see each other and they're like, "Oh, I love you," and it gives you like this weird, like nice vibes, and it's weird to see them put like a biblical story like with just like a silly Disney spin on there. But I actually really appreciated that segment. I also like the segment at the end with like the plants and the lava. I think that really works pretty well, and the flamingo yo-yo sequence works pretty well. So all those sequences are pretty decent, but it still has the issue of just being super disconnected all over the place, just a bunch of random sequences. So because of that, it's just all right to me. And then the MVP for the film, I did go with Donald Duck because of those sequences on Noah's Ark. I have him as the 48th best most valuable player. So there we go. Next up, we have number 46, The Rescuers Down Under. Another sequel, actually, here in the all right tier. Now, interestingly, I have Rescuers Down Under below the original Rescuers, which we'll get to later. But there's like some things I really don't like about Rescuers Down Under compared to the original. For one, I really don't like Bianca as much. In the original Rescuers, Bianca was one of my favorite characters. I really liked Bianca a lot. This movie, I think I liked Bernard more out of the two rats that are kind of like the lead roles. But both of them just kind of feel more annoying. The plot is a little boring too. It's just like Bernard trying to propose to her. And then like the little boy who gets kidnapped and is trying to save the eagle's life or whatever. Like, I just really do not care that much about this eagle going extinct. So it's not something that really gets me. The animation is great though. It's much better than the original Rescuers animation wise. But story wise and character wise, I don't like it as much. The MVP for this film, I ended up going with Jake, actually, the Australian rat that they meet when they go to Australia. And he was my 49th best most valuable player. I thought he was fine. He was all right. But this movie ultimately just like it just doesn't engage me in a way that I really enjoy that much. So that's my 46. And we move to number 45, which is The Black Cauldron. Now, The Black Cauldron is known as the movie that like almost broke Disney Animation Studios. They put a lot of money into it. It didn't make any money at the box offices. And you can see why. Like, the animation in it kind of looks garbage. The plot is really weird. It's super mythological. Like, they have like a prophetic pig that like sets the story in motion. It's just super weird. But that being said, like, it had some redeeming qualities. Honestly, the main reason it ends up here in the alright tier instead of the bad tier is because the ending is super good. It ends up having like a very Christ-reflecting sacrifice in this character named Gurgi sacrificing himself and like jumping into this pot of lava to save the world. Like, because basically like the Black Cauldron, it ends up needing somebody to jump into it as a sacrifice in order to like lift the curse from the land or whatever, which really reflects the idea of Jesus needing to sacrifice himself to lift the curse of sin from humanity. So because of that, like, I really did appreciate that Christ sacrifice at the end from Gurgi, who I went with as the MVP. However, Gurgi as a character altogether, I did in my bad tier for most valuable players at 52, because he is kind of annoying. And even though he ends up being a Christ sacrifice, which makes him more redeemable near the end, he's still kind of annoying. The leads just don't have a lot of personality in Terran and Princess Elanway. But I think the movie is alright overall, because like that Christ sacrifice really kind of, it gives me a little bit more of an emotional connection, landing it at number 45. So next up we have number 44, which is Brother Bear. And Brother Bear, to be honest, like, based on what I've heard about it, I kind of expected to rank it even lower. Going in, like, I've heard really bad things about Brother Bear. People say it's just a trash movie, and I think it's an alright movie. It's not good, I'm not gonna say that, but I think it's alright. Basically the plot ends up being about this guy who, his brother basically dies because of an accident with a bear. So he ends up hating bears. He ends up hating nature. He also like gets this, like, 'cause in their tribe, like, everybody gets associated with an animal, and so he gets given the bear of love, and he's like, oh, like I'm the person of love, and that's just like makes him a really unlikable protagonist because he gets assigned like this badge of honor of like you are a man who reflects love, and he's like, oh, I hate, like, this is lame, like my friend got courage and wisdom and I got love sucks, like it's just like I can't get that, like love is something I would be honored to be called. So just like watching him go through this whole movie to realize that love isn't a bad thing just feels super stupid because it's like love should have been a good thing from the very first moment of the movie. Like, you know, you should have been honored right away. And it's really stupid. And then like the fact they turn into bears, it's like it's cool that like he gets to learn about how a different perspective is because he actually ends up killing this nice little baby bear's mom because of anger towards just bears altogether because of his brother dying. And then he bonds with this little bear, and then at the end he finds out that, oh, like I'm literally the one who killed his mom. And that's kind of like an interesting emotional moment, but something that doesn't work with it for me is just the fact that it basically just boils down to the fact that they end up revealing this emotional moment when they're playing like a song in the background. Like they don't even have the characters talk about it. They literally just play some like emotional Phil Collins song behind this scene of the main characters sharing about, oh, hey, by the way, I killed your mom. Like, and it's just like, why just montage that? If it doesn't work for me. But like, I kind of respect what this movie tried to do. I think it had a few things right. The animation was really good, I think, which brought it up to all right for me. And, yeah, overall, like, the messages and the morals were interesting. I also like that he decided to stay a bear at the end instead of becoming human again, just because I think that was a little bit more of a creative twist on it to let him stay a bear. So yeah, it was good. I really appreciated it in some ways. My most valuable player here is actually the highest one we've had so far at number 30 in Sitka, which is actually the brother who dies at the beginning of the film. And he's one of the more likable characters they kill off in a Disney film at the beginning. Like, I think he's a really good brotherly figure. It's just a bummer that he dies so soon and that his brother, his stupid brother, like, just is dumb the entire movie and doesn't realize that, like, he's trying to, like, be nice and, like, basically, like, he doesn't understand Sitka's message about what he should be doing, and so he has to get turned into a bear to learn his lesson, and it's just really dumb. But yeah, I do like Sitka a lot, so he ended up as the 30th best most valuable player of the 59 movies. And then this movie overall was at 44. So there you go, 44 Brother Bear. And we get to 43, which is Melody Time. The last movie in our all right tier. So Melody Time for me is actually like a movie I didn't expect much out of because it comes from that same wartime era as Make Mine Music and Fun and Fancy Free and Saludos Amigos and Ichabod and Mr. Toad. All these movies that were terrible. Melody Time, though, it's a lot better. It does still have the same issue of just being a package film where it's just like, you know, a bunch of random segments that don't go together at all. But some of the segments are actually good this time. And like the one that really stuck with me and the reason like it gets as high as it does is because of the Johnny Appleseed segment. Just because like the fact that they back then they could put a whole segment in a Disney movie that's about the Lord was so cool to me. Because like nowadays they could never make a Disney movie and put Jesus in it like explicitly like that. But Johnny Appleseed, like, they literally have, like, the song, the Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, sun and the rain and the Appleseed. You know, that song that they sing at lunch all the time to, like, pray. Like, that, like, it was in a Disney movie. And, like, I don't know if that originated from the Disney movie or they just put it in there, but either way, it's so nice to see, just, like, a part of this movie that is so applicable to Christianity in every way. As he's planting seeds and stuff, like it's really relatable in that aspect. And then I also really like the Little Toot segment and like the Pico Spill segment near the end. So Melody Time, like it has some really good stuff, but it does still have the problem of being a package film. So overall, I ended up giving Johnny Appleseed the number 32 spot in the MVP rankings. I think he was a really good most valuable player, but his segment was still only like 5-8 minutes. It wasn't really enough to get to know him as a character. So he was good, but something missing for the most valuable players. And then overall, yeah, the movie came in at 43. I like Melody Time, but it's still just an all right movie, even with the beautifulness of the Johnny Appleseed segments, it still kind of lacks something as a whole because of being just a package film with so many random assorted segments. So there you go. That's Melody Time, rounding out the alright tiers. So to recap that alright tier, we have Fantasia 2000 at 47, Rescuers Down Under at 46, Black Cauldron at 45, Brother Bear at 44, and Melody Time at 43. So here we are. Now we're into the respectable tier, which this is one of the biggest tiers. It's another tier with 10 movies. And so our number 42 at the bottom of the respectable tier is Sleeping Beauty. Which, it's interesting because Sleeping Beauty, like, based on the scores that came out, like, it ended up landing here. I don't really have a lot of issues with Sleeping Beauty. I think I'm just very indifferent to a lot of it. Because one thing I don't like about Sleeping Beauty is that it focuses, like, the most of the story is just about these three little fairy sisters who are raising Sleeping Beauty. And I think that the three fairy sisters really don't bring a whole lot to the film as a whole. And because of that, like, when you're supposed to be following them, like, I don't even remember any of their names. I think one might be, like, Mayweather or something. I don't know. I don't even remember their names. Merryweather, Mary something. I don't know. But because the fairy sisters are so forgettable and uninteresting, that brings the movie down. Also, Aurora barely is in her own movie as a Disney princess. Like, she gets a few scenes here and there, but a lot less than any other Disney princess. Like, there's a reason Aurora, for many, is considered the worst Disney princess because she's barely in her own movie. Most people, the biggest takeaway they get from this movie is Maleficent. And I like Maleficent's plot. I don't really think she gets the character development, though. And I think that's why they made the live action where they actually develop her more, because in the original animated version, there's not a lot of development there. However, one thing I do like about Sleeping Beauty, compared to the movies that come before it in Cinderella and Snow White, is they end up giving the prince a little more personality. Because in Cinderella, Snow White, which we'll get to later, the princes are the worst part of both of those movies. Because they're just no personality guys who come in and kiss the girl or, like, dance with the girl. And Prince Philip is actually a little bit more interesting. I really like what they do with this storyline here to that they meet each other and then they both think they're being forced to marry someone else, but they're actually just being forced to marry each other and they don't know that. I think that really works super well as a plot twist. So it's honestly a pretty decent movie. It's very respectable, in my opinion. It's the last movie of the Silver Age of Disney, which I think is really interesting. That is just coming at the end of that era. My most valuable player for the film was Prince Philip, because I think that he really begins to open the door for Disney princes to have a personality. So I landed him at 41 in my most valuable player rankings, and a pretty respectable MVP. So there we go. That's number 42, Sleeping Beauty. Then we move to number 41, Lady and the Tramp. I talked about this a little bit earlier with the Aristocats. It has a very similar story of just kind of like a rich family's dog and a poor dog from the street falling in love, just like the rich cat and the poor cat from Aristocats. However, I would say that with Lady and the Tramp, the biggest thing that people remember about Lady and the Tramp is the spaghetti scene, right? And the spaghetti scene is great. It's really a nothing burger, though, in, like, the movie. It's just, like, okay, they kiss each other once, like, in this, like, when they're at, like, the little behind-the-scenes, like, stand where, you know, Tramp gets, like, these random dudes to make him spaghetti. Like, it's just, it's so random. It's not that interesting. I do kind of like the aspect of replacement, like, where Lady's afraid of being replaced by the baby and her family, and that's, like, kind of what sets off the whole the entire journey. And I think that's something that's super good, because Lady and the Tramp as a whole is a movie that really, like, that theme is a really strong theme for the movie, because people can relate to the idea of, oh, I'm gonna be replaced by somebody. And there's themes that, or there's movies that do that better that we'll get to higher on the list. I think the reason I don't relate with this one as much, too, is because I just don't like dogs. I think a dog lover would probably have this movie higher. But for me personally, I don't connect with dog characters as well. And again, I think it's harder to connect with a rich dog. Because again, 101 Dalmatians is still higher on this list because the dogs belong to a poor family. You can empathize more with them. Lady comes from this rich family, and therefore it makes it harder to connect with her as a character, I think, as compared to the dogs in 101 Dalmatians, which we'll get to later. As for the MVP for this movie, I did go with Tramp. I think he's a better character than Lady, but he's still not that great. I have him at 44 in my most valuable player rankings. So there we go. That is number 41, Lady and the Tramp. Then we move to number 40, Snow White. So this is the first ever Disney film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And people might say this is a little low for it, given that it started it all. But I can't really justify putting it any higher, just because the thing about Snow White for me is it really just boils down to the prince. The prince is the worst part of this movie. It sets up this Disney trope that lasts for years of just like true love's kiss saving everything. And luckily, like in a lot of the revival films, they break that trope, and that's not how the solutions happen anymore. But it sets up this trope that goes on for years to misrepresent true love. And I think that's just really the biggest issue with it. But the film in itself is fine. It's pretty decent at some points. I kind of like Snow White as a princess. I think she's fine for that era. She's interesting enough. The songs are a little bit too operatic. But there is like Hi Ho, which is a really good song. Like hi ho, it's off to work we go. Like that song, super classic, super good, super memorable. My MVP for the movie was actually Grumpy of the Seven Dwarfs, and he's the highest MVP we have so far at number 23. I think Grumpy was written really well. But there's others of the Seven Dwarfs that you don't even remember their names after the movie. And I think that's like the issue with it, right? Is some of the Seven Dwarfs really connect with, but some of them are just so forgettable that it's like, it kind of balances out the character score for that reason, because you don't really know them all. The Wicked Witch, or the Queen, or whatever, is also a really terrifying villain. Like, the way she's animated is super creepy, which I ended up bringing the emotion score for this movie up just because of how creepy she is, because it's really, really creepy. How creepy they made that witch that is trying to kill Snow White with the apple. So that's really good and really interesting. And yeah, like I said, I had Grumpy at 23, 23rd best MVP. So one of the top half MVPs. But the movie as a whole, it just kind of lands it respectable, because I feel like you have to respect the movie that started it all. But ultimately, I don't really enjoy it as much as other movies. So it lands here at number 40. Then we move to number 39, Oliver and Company. So this is another cats and dogs movie. Disney had like a pretty big like thing about, in the Silver Age and in the Dark Age, they made a lot of movies about animals, and most of them aren't hits, as you're seeing. Like most of them here at the bottom. Oliver and Company, it's fine. It's a decent movie. Honestly, like most of the movie, I didn't really enjoy that much. But there are like some really, really good moments that bring it to at least respectable. One of them is the Why Should I Worry song. That song is just super good, super iconic Disney music, with Dodger singing. And then the other scene that I really like is with Fagin, which is I think like the mob boss leader, where he ends up like basically growing a heart and giving Oliver back to Jenny, the little girl in the film, who thinks she lost her cat. And it's just like this really, really heartfelt moment to see like a bad guy kind of turn from his bad guy ways, which I think is really nice. But what brings the movie down for me is just Oliver as a protagonist is not that interesting. Just like some cat who ends up joining a street gang of dogs. It's just super random. Doesn't really connect with me in a very powerful way at all. My MVP for this film actually ended up going to Tito too, which shows you how like few interesting characters there were. Because even Fagin with his emotional moment, he wasn't that great of a character. Jenny was not that great of a character. I gave it to Tito because Tito's just kind of like this, hyperactive dog He has some good one-liners in there, but he still just lands all right in the MVP rankings as my 45th best most valuable player. So there you go. That's Tito coming in at 45 and Oliver and Company coming in at 39. And we have 38, which is the Rescuers, the original Rescuers, actually. And so we had the Rescuers Down Under at 46, but Rescuers is higher. So this is a hot take because I know most people prefer the sequel. However, for me, the first Rescuers has one thing the sequel doesn't have, or it has two things. For one, they write Bianca a lot better. And I really like Bianca in the first film. I don't like Bianca in the second film. The other thing I like better about the first film is Penny. Penny is really the whole reason this movie got as high as it did. And actually, like, in my MVP rankings, I have Penny as the 18th best most valuable player. Because I love Penny. And Penny, for those of you who haven't seen this movie, is basically like this girl from an orphanage who gets kidnapped. And she's so sad. Like, there's these really emotional scenes where she's just like, nobody's adopting me because I'm not good enough. And it's just like, it just like tugs at your heartstrings. And it makes you be like, dang, like, that's just like a feeling that, you know, everybody goes through sometime in their life. Like, just that feeling of not being good enough to be chosen. And it's just like, I connect with Penny on this deep level. There's even like a scene where she's like praying at her bedside in the movie. And that stuff is so good. I really love her a lot, and that's really the biggest reason that boosted this movie over the other Rescuers. Because in the second Rescuers, the kid who gets kidnapped, I don't even know his name. I think it's like Cody or something, but I'm not even confident in that. But Penny is so easy to connect with on an emotional level. The biggest problem with Rescuers that keeps it from getting higher is the story is not that interesting. The villain in this movie is basically just a ripoff of Cruella de Vil. It's not as interesting. And then the animation is trash. Like, this is one of the worst animations of any Disney movie. Like, just the art style kind of looks complete garbage at a lot of different points in it. It's not very good looking from an animation perspective. But I will say that I do appreciate the movie because of Penny. So Penny is really the best part of it for me as a whole. So that's what we have at number 38. It's The Rescuers. Now we move to number 37, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now this is the original Winnie the Pooh movie, which comes from the Disney Dark Age. And actually, The Rescuers is also from the Disney Dark Age. And so is Oliver and Company, actually. All three of those movies came out in the Dark Age. So the reason I think all these fall a little lower is because, you know, they didn't have as much of a budget. They didn't have the vision of Walt Disney anymore now that he was dead. But Winnie the Pooh is actually like a character who goes on to transcend his movie and becomes like a pop culture icon, which is crazy to me because I don't actually like this movie that much. Like, there is the one scene, right? The one scene at the end when him and Christopher Robin are walking and they're talking about doing nothing together, which I think is a really cool principle, really relatable. Like the idea of the most valuable way to do something is to do nothing. Like, I've seen that so often in my friendships in life that just doing nothing together with a friend can be like so powerful, so bonding, just to be with somebody you love. And that is something that you can connect with. As far as the Winnie the Pooh characters too, like they're all very iconic characters, like Piglet, Tigger, Eeyore, Pooh. They're all iconic. My issue with this first one though is this Winnie the Pooh movie, I don't think the characters are written as well as in the second Winnie the Pooh movie, which you'll see later on the list. I feel like in this movie, a lot of the characters are written annoyingly, and a lot of the story beats annoy me. Like specifically near the end when Tigger's like climbing a tree and scared, and everybody's trying to get him to stop bouncing because he's just bouncing too much. It gets a little annoying. I also don't like where Pooh's just like stuck in Rabbit's hole for like the first 20 minutes of the movie. It's just really not that interesting. So as a whole, like, it's not that engaging of a plot. It has some really good iconic moments and the characters are memorable. As far as the MVP, I went with Tigger, but I feel like there was something missing with Tigger in this performance. So he lands at 34 in my most valuable player rankings. I feel like he wasn't really written as well as Tigger could have been written. So he ended up a little bit lower. but still in the good but something missing tier for most valuable players. And this film came in at number 37 on our movie rankings. There we go. Next up, we got number 36. It's the last movie from the wartime era that we haven't talked about yet. It's The Three Caballeros at number 36. Now, The Three Caballeros surprised me a lot because it came right after Saludos Amigos, which is in our unwatchable tier, way at the bottom. But The Three Caballeros is basically the same idea of like Latin America documentary type thing, except there's two things that are a lot better about it. For one, there is live action integration, and that really kind of brought me to a place of like nostalgia for my time in Ghana, because when I was in Ghana, Africa, they would have a lot of scenes where like, or there'd be a lot of times where like we would dance with the local people in the community, and the scenes of like the Latin Americans dancing with Donald Duck and Goofy, or not Goofy, Donald Duck and Jose and whatever the little rooster guy's name is, were super cool. And I really liked seeing that because it just brought me back to that vibe of like dancing with people from another culture and just kind of getting to engage with that. And so that was really cool to me. And then like the second part of this movie that like brings it up for me for sure is the song. Like the Three Caballeros song is so fun. Like it just kind of engages you. It gets you laughing. And overall, that's what brings this movie as high as it is. Like there's a lot of really lighthearted, fun moments in this movie that just like, they make me smile. Now, is it still below good? Yeah, it is. It definitely is still just like a segment movie. There's a lot of segments that aren't that interesting. You know, it still has those issues that all of the movies in the wartime era tend to have. But it's also super fun. I also really, it's a hot take, but I actually really like when Donald Duck is flirting with all the live action women. I know some people, like, that's the reason they hate this movie. But I think it's just really, really amusing and hilarious. So I ended up having Donald Duck again as the MVP. He's the first MVP that we've had for two different movies because he was also the MVP in Fantasia 2000 when he was on the Noah's Ark boat. But I also have him as the MVP here for all his live action, you know, shenanigans. But he's still just an alright MVP as the 47th best most valuable player of the films. So there you go. Donald Duck. And The Three Caballeros at number 36. There we go. Then we move to number 35, which is Meet the Robinsons. Now, Meet the Robinsons is it's a movie from the post-Renaissance period. It actually comes right after Chicken Little in the chronology. And you can see the improvements from Chicken Little. Like, the animation's better. I still don't really like the character designs all that much. I think the humans' character designs are kind of wonky. But I think that's kind of what they were going for. I think they were trying to make the Robinsons this wacky family, which I think they partially succeed in, and partially it just gets too annoying. But yeah, so I think the designs are okay. The animation's a step up from Chicken Little, but it's still not great. The characters are fine. Really, I think what brings this movie up for me is the bowler hat guy, Mike Yagubian. I think he's a very fun villain. He's got a really fun backstory and personality, which really helps to improve the movie. And also the moral of the movie, keep moving forward. Even though they kind of shove it down your throat through the film, is a really good moral. It's really good to remember just to keep moving forward in life, even in those moments when it's difficult, even when you're facing failure. So the moral of the film, really good. But the characters, kind of annoying. The animation, subpar. And those things kind of bring it down for me. Also, the twist of that, the hat becoming the main villain at the end, Doris or whatever. It's kind of interesting because this is like pretty much the first time in Disney's canon that I can remember them doing a twist villain. So that's really interesting to see the first twist villain is just this weird hat becoming the villain at the end, which I think is interesting. But it's also not as good of a twist villain as future twist villains. So even though it starts that kind of tradition in Disney, it doesn't really do it super well. And so because of that, it lands at number 35. The MVP for this film for me went to Mike Yagubian, like I was talking about earlier, and he was our 38th best MVP. So yeah, he was a respectable MVP in a respectable movie. Number 35. So there we go. Then we go to number 34, which is Bambi. Bambi is a film that A lot of people might like more than I do. I think Bambi's okay. I think watching it, the pacing is a little bit slow. Bambi, Thumper, and Flower, the little skunk, all just living in the forest, is a little bit of a boring setting for me. It's just kind of a little bit boring, just watching a bunch of animals living in a forest. And some moments just feel a little bit too slow. But that being said, I think that this is really when Disney got better at storytelling. Because, like, the first few movies of, like, Snow White, Pinocchio, and even Dumbo to some extent, like, the pacing feels a little bit all over the place. Like, there's really slow moments, and there's, like, fast moments, and it's just kind of all over. I think Bambi got better at least, like, cyclical storytelling. Because at the beginning, they have Bambi being born, and at the end, they have the next kid being born, and it's like that full circle moment. And they do it again in Lion King, where they have Simba born at the beginning, and they have Simba having his kid at the end. So it's the same cyclical thing, but it's developed here for the first time in Bambi. And I think that's cool. I also like, one of my favorite moments in this movie is when all of the kids are growing up, Bambi and Thumper and Flower, and then like they're all like, we're the boys, we're all hanging out, and then like they all meet their love interest and leave one by one, because that was like relatable to me. I was just like, yeah, that's how it tends to go. Like, you know, like you're all the boys, and then like, you know, everyone meets their love interest, and then all of a sudden they're not the boys anymore. So that was kind of relatable. That made me laugh. And then Thumper was my MVP, and I think Thumper had a lot of good one-liners in the film. But he's still not all that interesting. I had him as the 40th best most valuable player. So I thought Thumper was fine. He was decent. He was good. But he wasn't my favorite MVP by any means. So yeah, Thumper was good, and the movie was fine. It was respectable. It's one of the original 5 Disney movies, and I think that it set things up to be a lot better in the future. But overall, number 34 on my list. Then we move to number 33, Pinocchio. So Pinocchio is, again, like another film from those original 5 movies in the Golden Age. And I actually really like Pinocchio. But I think like my biggest issue with it is, again, the storytelling is kind of all over the place. I really don't like how it just jumps from one thing to the next as often as it does. Like, I think that the way that he just kind of like randomly gets a note that his father is trapped in a whale is weird. I think like all this stuff with the kids turning into donkeys is a little bit too dark, even for Disney. And also, like, the thing that this movie is known for is Pinocchio's nose growing, but that only happens in like one scene, which I thought it was going to be a lot more as I was watching it, because that's just like what I figured Pinocchio was about, just like his nose growing all the time. But that really wasn't what it was about. And also, just like at the end when he turns into a real boy, it doesn't feel earned to me. I think that's my biggest issue with the film, is it just like, it feels like he did not earn his reward to me, because, and I think that's because I feel like the whale stuff is just too random, too not fitting with the rest of the film. So those things bring it down for me. However, one of the best parts of the film for me is Jiminy Cricket. And I think the idea of just having a conscience telling you right and wrong, it brings up the idea of like Holy Spirit being like that conscience in our lives, and Holy Spirit telling us what's right and wrong. And so there is like that biblical application in that aspect of it. And I really like Jiminy Cricket a lot. So that really brings up the film from the kind of all over the place storytelling that I don't like about it. Jiminy Cricket for me lands as the 21st best most valuable player out of all the MVPs. So really love Jiminy. I think he adds a lot to the film. And then overall, Pinocchio ends at the 33rd best film of the Disney canon. So there you go. That is number 33 and the end of our respectable tier. So to recap the respectable tier, we had number 42, Sleeping Beauty, number 41, Lady and the Tramp, number 40, Snow White, number 39, Oliver and Company, number 38, The Rescuers, number 37, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, number 36, The Three Caballeros, number 35, Meet the Robinsons, number 34, Bambi, and number 33, Pinocchio. So now we're into the top 32. We're almost halfway done. We're not even there yet. We're an hour in. So this is going to be a long podcast, but I expected it to be. There's a lot to talk about with these Disney films. So here we go. Number 32. We got 101 Dalmatians. Now, I've been mentioning this film periodically throughout this when we talked about Lady and the Tramp and about the Aristocats. I think out of all of the older Disney pet films, Dalmatians is the best out of the old ones. And I really like Dalmatians mainly because of the protagonist and his owner. Roger, to me, is such a fun owner. Roger Radcliffe. I have him as the 29th best, most valuable player. Good but something missing. I feel like he's a really good owner for the dogs. But the movie's not really about him. I wish it was more about him because I just like that he's like a songwriter. And when he writes like the Cruella de Vil song, it's just like super fun. Cruella de Vil too, also a good villain. And Pongo is like a much more likable dog protagonist, I think, than the dog protagonist in Lady and the Tramp. Or even like Oliver and Company with Dodger. Like I think Pongo is my favorite of the dog protagonists in the movie so far. I think it's a really good film. I think that the Dalmatians and their family are more relatable because they're coming from like a poor family. The love story of Roger falling in love with his girlfriend at the park too is just like a cute love story at the beginning. That just kind of gets your emotions a little bit more. And yeah, I just really empathize more with the family. When they lose their puppies, it's really sad. When like that one puppy's about to die and then Roger like, just like taps it a little bit and it comes out alive. Like that's really cute. What brings the movie to the good but something missing tier though is two things. One, the animation is not that great. It's still from that weird transition period between the Silver Age and the Dark Age. And I think it kind of shows that the animation isn't super amazing. It's not even as good as Lady and the Tramp as far as animation goes. And then I think that the other thing is the sequence of going back home, like once they've been kidnapped, is just a little bit long. Like as you're watching like 101 Dalmatians trekking across the screen, it just kind of gets really slow at some points. Just like, just seeing the same model of dogs just like going and going and going. And especially like when they're covered in the dust, like to disguise themselves. Like they cross the street in like 5 or 6 different groups. And it's just like, the scene went on way longer than it needed to. And even just like having 101 Dalmatians was, I feel like it fit the title, but it just kind of seems out of nowhere because there actually is only like 15 Dalmatians that belong to the main characters. And there's just like all these random stray Dalmatians that join halfway through the film. And it kind of feels like random that they just all show up. So because of that, overall, the film ends at 32, but it does land in the good but something missing tier because I do think it's a good movie. I really do enjoy it. I'd like to watch it again. Good movie. Just it's missing a little something. So there we go. Number 32. Number 31, we have Winnie the Pooh 2011. So this is the second Winnie the Pooh movie, and it's actually one of Disney's other shortest movies. It's basically the shortest movie besides Saludos Amigos in the entire Disney canon. But I think that works well for Winnie the Pooh. I think that Winnie the Pooh, the other Winnie the Pooh movie, kind of drug on a little too long and kind of had a little too many disconnected story segments. But I think the Winnie the Pooh 2011 it has a more cohesive story of just trying to find Eeyore's lost tail, and whoever wins or whoever finds him the lost tail is going to win a honey pot. And I think that's like a really just very simple story. I think all of the characters are written better. And I have Tigger again as the MVP, but this time I have him as the 24th best MVP overall versus like the other Tigger performance was the 34th best MVP. So I think that Tigger's written a lot better here as he's trying to like teach Eeyore to be Tigger number 2. I think that's really fun, really lighthearted. And the moral at the end of this movie actually works pretty well too with Pooh. With Pooh basically, the time when he finally gets his honey is when he decides he's going to give up on it. Like, he has this opportunity to get some honey finally, but he decides, no, I'm not going to get the honey. I'm going to instead get this tail for Eeyore. And I think that's really cool that he ends up deciding at the end, like, you know what, I'm going to choose to be a good friend over choosing what I want. And then at the end, he gets what he wants anyways, which is something that I found is very common in relationship with God and even in just like, what happens oftentimes in our lives is that the moment when we stop just trying to be selfish and looking for what we want for ourselves and do something for someone else, then sometimes out of that, we might just coincidentally, like, just because, like, almost like good karma or whatever, like, it comes back around and you end up getting blessed, even though you chose to help somebody else instead of taking the thing for yourself. Then you end up getting for something for yourself, just like coincidentally on the side. And I think that was kind of cool. I really appreciated it. Winnie the Pooh 2011, super good movie. But what it's missing, I think, is just the length. It's a little short, and that's, I think, why it's landing in the good but something missing tier. But a good movie. I really like that one a lot better than the other Winnie the Pooh movie. So it lands at number 31. So now number 30. This is the middle movie. Middle movie here at an hour and 10 minutes into the podcast. So here we go. It's gonna be a long one, but let's keep going. So we got number 30. It's Hercules. So Hercules, I actually don't really like Hercules that much, to be completely honest. Like, I'm a little surprised it even lands this high. But I think the reason it does land this high is because the music is good. Like, I Can Go the Distance is super good. And then I Won't Say I'm in Love is super good. Those two songs, really, really good songs. Also, Meg is a decent character. I have her in the good but something missing tier for most valuable players at 35. I think Meg's story is a little bit interesting, how she's been used and abused in the past with her loves. She's like scared to fall in love again. Super good. Now, I'll be honest, I think the film would have been better if it focused on Meg as the protagonist, but it focuses on Hercules, and that's what I think is the biggest issue with this film. Is Hercules is kind of a horrible protagonist. He's not as bad as like Basil in The Great Mouse Detective, but I think the biggest issue with Hercules is he's just unrelatable in every capacity. Like, he's a guy trying to become a god. Like, that's just not something you can relate to in our life. Like, as a human being, we're not supposed to try and become gods. And so, like, I kind of hate that. And this idea of, like, him trying to perform one heroic act to become a god, it's not a story I can connect with on a level that I can with a lot of other Disney heroes, especially from the Renaissance, because this is my lowest Renaissance film besides Rescuers Down Under in this ranking. And Renaissance is, like, considered one of Disney's best all-time periods, but Hercules for me just doesn't live up to what was happening in the Renaissance. It does still have those good songs, but the protagonist doesn't work as well, and it doesn't really focus on the best character in the movie, which I think is Meg, as much as it should. It does have some memorable moments, but they aren't as memorable as other films. And then I think that the other thing about it is just Hades. Hades is actually a pretty good villain overall. I do like Hades as a villain. So that, I think, is another reason it ends up getting up to here in the good but something missing tier. But that something missing really, really resonates deep with this one, which is why it lands only at number 30, right in the middle of the Disney canon. Then we move on to number 29, which is another movie I'm surprised made it as high as it did here. But it's Frozen 2. So I always talk about how I don't like Frozen 2. But let me just acknowledge the good stuff about it first, because it does have some really good things. And I think, like, the two things that really bring it this high in the ranking is, one, the animation. I think this is the second best animation of any Disney film, period. Like, it's so good. So good. The character design is so much better than the original Frozen. And the sequences, really, really beautiful. So, on the animation level, it's amazing. It's super good. You can tell they put a lot of money into it. It's currently the best-selling Disney movie of all time, because of just coming off of Frozen type. So that's a big thing. The other really good thing about the movie is the songs. I think the songs, again, are super strong. Some Things Never Change I really like, and I really like The Next Right Thing, the song where Anna's kind of just being super depressed in the cave. That's just, like, it's a super good movie. Now, I actually went with Anna as the MVP for this movie too, but I have her as the 43rd best MVP in the alright tier, because honestly, I hate Anna in the original Frozen. I think she's a garbage character in that movie, and just really annoying, to be honest. In this movie, I think she's better, but I think every other character in this movie is worse. Like, I think Elsa is written so annoying in this movie, so selfish, where she's just, like, willing to leave people behind all over the place. I think Kristoff is really annoying because he just gets reduced to just, like, some dude trying to propose the entire movie. I think Olaf is just super annoying in this movie. And then Anna, even though she's better, she still kind of has like these weird awkward moments whenever Kristoff's trying to propose that are hard to connect with. So overall, she lands like as the 40. Oh no, it's the 46th best MVP. I think I said 43 before, but yeah, yeah. So she's not a good most valuable player. All the characters in this movie are written terribly, which I think is one of the biggest issues with it. I think they were trying to do too much with the plot too, and the plot doesn't really get communicated that well. I think the stuff about water having memory is just a little convoluted. And then I don't like how they bring Elsa back to life at the end. I know that might be a hot take, as people probably want that happy ending, but like every time I watch this movie, when Elsa dies and then like all of a sudden she's back just because the dam collapsed, it doesn't really make any sense. And overall, I think that the story in this movie and the characters are so bad, but they get saved by the animation and by the songs, and so because of that, it lands at number 29. But if you want to argue it lower, I wouldn't argue with you. But there's some people who think that this is amazing and even better than the first Frozen, and I think that's just a really wrong take, like in every sense of the word, to be honest. So there you go. But it's good enough because of the songs and the animation. But there's definitely a lot missing. It tries to do too much that it doesn't really do anything well, is kind of what I've always said about Frozen 2. So there you go, number 29. Next up, number 28 is Cinderella. Cinderella is a classic. It's one of the like original Disney films. It kicked off the Silver Age of Disney after all the wartime garbage. This followed Ichabod and Mr. Toad, like, so, you know, it's not a very high bar to be better than, but it was a really good movie. Cinderella. It sets up this Disney formula. It kind of does what Snow White does, except better. I think the true love in this movie feels a lot more true than in Cinderella or in Snow White, because in Snow White it's just like, someday my prince will come, and it's just like, whatever, nobody cares, stop singing so operatically. But with Cinderella, you can kind of tell why she desires more, because she's been sidelined her entire life. She's been locked in this tower. Well, not really locked up, but like, you know, she hasn't really been able to leave the house. She's been more of just a housemaid for her stepsisters and her evil stepmother. And you can really kind of relate to her a lot more than I think Aurora or Snow White. Out of the three original Disney princesses, she's clearly the best. But the thing about this movie is it actually focuses a lot less on Cinderella than you would remember. It focuses a lot on the cat and the mice. And that's what I think is the something missing out of this movie, is it doesn't really focus on Cinderella as much. And the other issue I have with this movie is the fairy godmother. There's no explanation to why Cinderella has a fairy godmother. She just kind of shows up randomly out of nowhere to grant her wishes, and it's just super bizarre. Doesn't really make any sense. And because of that, I think that the film as a whole suffers a little bit. One scene that I really do love about this movie, though, is the scene where Cinderella's just getting beat up by her sisters. Like, you know, the mice go into all this effort to sew her this nice dress, and then the sisters just whip it off, like, one piece at a time. Like, they're literally, like, stripping her. And it's so dark and so emotionally touching. Like, up to this point, I think it was the most emotional I got, like, in the first 12 Disney movies. And I remember watching it and just being like, did they actually just do that? Did they actually just have these girls rip these clothes off of her? Like, that was nuts. So, I think that's a really powerful moment. Now, my MVP for this movie might surprise some people, but I actually went with The King as my MVP at number 27 in my MVP rankings. And it's funny because he doesn't even have a name. Like, I tried to figure out the King's name on the Disney Wiki, but they literally never say his name ever. But I think the King is just really funny, and he makes this movie for me just like in how he wants his son to get married. I think it's just super hilarious, like how he's just like, bro, you gotta get married. I want to have grandkids. I think that's super fun. It just like, it gets me excited watching him. And yeah, I think the something missing about this movie is really just like the Lucifer and the rat scenes are just, there's too many of them. And it distracts from the main storyline a little bit. But on the whole of things, I think this is a really good movie. Definitely deserving of a number 28 spot. And we're in the top half now. So this is a really good one. Definitely enjoy Cinderella at number 28. So there we go. Number 27 then. We're going back to the Disney Renaissance with Pocahontas. And Pocahontas, it follows Lion King actually in the chronology, so that's a tough act to follow. And a lot of people don't like Pocahontas because apparently, like, historically it's different than what actually happened to Pocahontas. And a lot of people don't like how they just turned her story into a cheesy Disney love story, which I can understand a little bit. I think what I like about this movie, though, is I like a couple things. For one, I like that Pocahontas has this desire to not just live the easy way in her life. She wants to take a different path. She wants to try something new, and I think that's a really relatable protagonist. I also like the idea of two warring families that are having people from both sides who are kind of meeting each other and falling in love and having this friendship or relationship in this case. I think that this is done better later in Fox and the Hound, which we'll talk about later on the list, because in Fox and the Hound it's a very similar case of you have a protagonist and from both different sides, and then they're falling in love, but they're like sides hate each other, and they do that here with Pocahontas and I think John Smith is his name. So I think that's good. I think there are some really silly, goofy, weird parts in this movie though, like the talking tree and the spiritism is a little bit too much. But I do really like the sacrifice at the end, or it's not quite a sacrifice, but it's where like Pocahontas and John Smith are like, Pocahontas basically gets in front of John Smith when her chief is about to kill him. I think that's super powerful. It brings together this like idea of love in a really cool way. And some of the songs in this movie, The Colors of the Wind, it's a really cool song. Like, I don't know if I morally agree with everything that it's saying, just because it gets a little too against spiritism and nature-y. But like, there are like the part where it talks about how high will the sycamore grow? If you cut it down, you'll never know. Like, I think that's really cool. Overall, I think it's a pretty good film, but I do think there is definitely that something missing that keeps it from being in my great tier. My MVP for the movie is just Pocahontas, which is again a step up. Like, this is the first Disney princess film where the princess is the MVP out of the ones that we've gone through so far, and I think that she's definitely done better than the three traditional princesses of Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, because she has more of a personality. And the other thing I don't like about this movie, though, is that like Pocahontas and John Smith can somehow communicate with each other, which doesn't make any sense because she's a native. And I think this is done way better later in Tarzan, when Tarzan and Jane have to actually like learn their language. I think that makes a lot more sense, that their communication builds more naturally, versus here it's just like, okay, now she can speak English. It's really bizarre. So I think that's another issue with Pocahontas. But again, I do think she's a better princess than the three original Disney princesses. But she comes out in this Renaissance period where Disney's doing some of their best movies of all time, and therefore gets pretty forgotten. So I think it's a good movie, but there's something missing. Number 27 overall for me. And then the last movie in my good but something missing tier is Dumbo at number 26. So this is my last movie from the original 5 of the Golden Age. I think it's the best. I know that's like a hot take too. I was looking at a lot of different ranking videos, and most people consider Dumbo the worst of those movies. They actually prefer Bambi, Snow White, Pinocchio, and Fantasia over Dumbo. A lot of people do. But for me, Dumbo is hands down the favorite. Like, even just like watching all these videos and listening to all these people's arguments, I still see Dumbo as the best. And I think it comes down to a couple different things. For one, I think Dumbo's getting bullied here is just, it emotionally gets me in a way that none of those other 4 movies get me. I think that you just really care about Dumbo a lot. It's just like this poor kid getting bullied. And unlike in Chicken Little, where like this kid's getting bullied and you don't really care about him, like Dumbo is just a really good silent protagonist too. Which that's a hard thing to do well as a silent protagonist, like someone who doesn't talk, but yet you still like emotionally connect with them. And I think that Dumbo is really done well in that way. But the other thing that really helps assist Dumbo is Timothy Q. Mouse. And I think Timothy Q. Mouse is underrated, because I think that from those original 5 movies, like most people would think of Jiminy Cricket as like the companion character
over Timothy Q. Mouse, and I think the two of them are very similar. But I think Timothy Q. Mouse is actually a little bit more inspirational. Like he goes on these really really heartfelt speeches about Dumbo and about caring for him and about how like this one thing that he has of his ears, like it makes him awkward, but it ends up being the thing that saves the day at the end, which actually parallels another one of my favorite stories of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, where Rudolph gets made fun of for his glowing nose, but it ends up being the thing that saves the day in the end. And similarly, Dumbo with his ears and the elephant flying, very similar concept of just like the thing that everybody calls you out for, things that makes you stupid, actually makes you awesome. And I think that's something that God's spoken to me through in a lot of different ways in my own life, which make it a very, very strong Disney message, I think. Now, I do think the storytelling is still a little bit not as great. The movie also is one of Disney's shortest all-time films at only like 64 minutes or something. So it's a shorter film. But following Fantasia, which is 1 hour too long, it feels welcome that it's a shorter film. But I do think the storytelling's a little weird. Like Dumbo doesn't really fly till like the last 15 minutes. And like the drunk elephant scene, also a little bit weird. Now, this movie gets docked also for having the crows, and apparently, like, black people look at that as a racist depiction because, like, they're crows smoking, but, like, all crows are black, so, in my opinion, it doesn't really get that offensive. And I actually really like the "When I See an Elephant Fly" song. I think it's super fun and goofy, and adds something to the film. So I think on the whole, Dumbo is really, really good. It's definitely still missing something to keep it out of great tier, but it's definitely the best film we've had so far, and definitely the best of the golden age, which puts it at number 26. So there we go. That is our good but something missing tier. To recap, we have 101 Dalmatians at 32. Oh wait, did I don't know if I mentioned, but Timothy Q. Mouse was the 19th best MVP. I don't know if I said that or not, but just to lock that in. And then Pocahontas was 31st best. I don't know if I gave the number for her, but just want to throw those MVPs out there again. Anyways, back to the list. So we had 101 Dalmatians at 32, Winnie the Pooh 2011 at 31, Hercules at 30, Frozen 2 at 29, Cinderella at 28, Pocahontas at 27, and Dumbo at 26. Now we're into the top 25. So this is the great tier. These are Disney movies I think are great. They're short of amazing. They're short of masterpiece, but they're great. These are great movies. So we move to number 25. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's Fox and the Hound. I think the story of Fox and the Hound, again, very similar to Pocahontas. Like you have these two warring sides. Like there's the Fox family and the Hunter family, and they hate each other. But you have these two people that come in love, and well, not in love. Like Todd and Copper, it's not a love story, and I think that's actually why it works better than Pocahontas. Because I think generally speaking, I prefer friendship stories to love stories, and I think that's why it works a little better for me, especially at the end with the emotional moment. I think it's better than when Pocahontas steps in front of John Smith. I think it's actually a little bit better done when Copper steps in front of his owner to protect Todd. I think that's really good, and I think it's cool how Todd like tries to save him from the bear. I think the emotions in this movie are really good. I will say that I really don't like the little woodpecker scenes. I feel like the side characters in this movie really bring it down from being better. But I do think it's still a better film than Pocahontas on the whole and whole, because the emotions hit a little deeper. This also happens before Pocahontas in the chronology. It's a Dark Age film, actually. It comes out in the Dark Age. Pocahontas comes off in the Renaissance. So Pocahontas feels like it's ripping off Fox and the Hound because it comes later. So I think that because Fox and the Hound does it first and does it better, this film lands in the great tier. As far as protagonists go, I have Todd as my 28th favorite MVP. I think he is a good MVP. He's a good character. I think there's a little something missing. I think it's mainly just because he's an animal character, to be honest. Like, a lot of the animal characters in Disney's canon are a little bit harder for me to connect to than human characters. But on the whole, he's good. Todd is a good character. The movie is a good movie. I even have it in the great tier as a great movie. At number 25. So there we go. Then we move to number 24, where I have Alice in Wonderland. Now, I was surprised how much I liked Alice in Wonderland on the rewatch here, because last time I watched Alice in Wonderland, I thought it was nonsense. I was just like, this is so stupid. But then I went into it on this rewatch, and I feel like the movie was created to be nonsense almost, which is weird. But I think when you look at it through that lens of like, okay, this is supposed to be nonsense, then I think that you appreciate it a lot more for what it is. And I really did on this rewatch. Also, the protagonist from this movie of Alice, I actually think is a really, really good female character. And like out of the first like 19 Disney films, she was my only MVP that was a female character. And she's not even a Disney princess, but I think that almost helps her because she's not just trying to find a love interest in the story. Like there's nothing that Alice is really trying to do in this story other than just, find the white rabbit. And so because of that, I think it's interesting that she like gets in this world of nonsense. But another thing I really like about this film is that Alice even gets annoyed with the nonsense by the end. Like you can see her rolling her eyes at the Queen of Hearts by the end, and she's just like, I want to escape this world of nonsense. And so you can relate to that because like as you're watching the film, you're like, oh my gosh, this is getting a little too crazy. And Alice is like, yeah, this is getting a little too crazy. And you can feel it like alongside her as she's just like struggling with all the craziness. And you're like, oh yeah, I can relate to you. Like I feel it. It's getting a little crazy. But some of the craziness is good. Like the Very Merry Unbirthday obviously stands out. And the painting the rose is red. Like that stuff's fun. The characters are pretty rich too. There's like a lot of memorable characters in the Queen of Hearts or in the She's Our Cat, the Mad Hatter, and Alice is my favorite of the movie, as I said, as my 16th favorite MVP. She lands in my amazing tier for MVPs, along with Penny and Timothy Q out of the MVPs so far that we've seen that are that high for me. So she's a really good most valuable player. On the whole of things, I think she's really good. Alice as a character in the movie. It works really well. Now, there are some segments in it that I don't like as much. Like, I don't really like the one where I think it's like the oysters and all that shenanigans. That's a little bit silly. It actually kind of feels a lot like a lot of the wartime films and like just a lot of random segments, but they go together so much better in this film. And the fact that it's like painted from the very beginning as like this is a film about nonsense, it really makes it work super well. And so it lands at number 24 in my rankings. Then we move to number 23, which is Peter Pan. And so Peter Pan is a pretty good movie. It's another one I had never seen until I went through this watch. And I actually really enjoyed Peter Pan quite a bit. I don't actually like Peter Pan that much as the protagonist, but there are 3 characters in this movie that make it for me, which are Captain Hook, who I think is one of the best Disney villains of all time. I have him as my 14th best MVP out of any movie. So, very strong performance by Captain Hook. And honestly, like, there's points in the movie where I actually hope he wins, because his plan is really well in the way that he captures Tinkerbell, who is my second of the 3 really good characters in this movie, and Tinkerbell. And I really never knew Tinkerbell was such like a jealous like little fella, because you hear about Tinkerbell and you see her like floating around in all these Disney movies, but like when you actually watch Peter Pan, she's just jealous the whole movie of Wendy, who's my third other favorite character of the movie. Like I love Wendy a lot. I think Wendy's a really good female protagonist. Again, just like Alice. Actually, this movie came right after Alice in Wonderland in order, in the Silver Age, and I think that Wendy's a really, really good female lead as well, and another lead that's not a princess. So she does really well. Tinkerbell's a really fun, jealous little fairy. And then Captain Hook is really the first Disney villain to really implement a devious plan. And I think that is something that I really appreciate about it. I guess maybe you could say like the fairy godmother, or not the fairy godmother, the evil stepmother in Cinderella. But the thing about her is she basically just locks Cinderella in a tower. It's not that devious. But Captain Hook, he literally kidnaps Tinkerbell, manipulates her into telling him where Peter Pan is, it's really well done, and he almost should have succeeded, which I think is really good. What holds the movie back for me is just there's a couple scenes I don't like as much, like the Indian scenes are a little bit nonsensical. But I think overall it's just a fun movie about being a kid, and also just the importance of growing up too, because Peter Pan's like, you can just stay with me and be a kid forever, but Wendy's like, no, we got to grow up. We got to go see our parents. And I really like the mother song too. Just the song about appreciating a mother, I think is really good. Resonated with me deeply for appreciating my mom. So there we go. Number 23 is Peter Pan. Then we move to number 22, which is Big Hero 6. Now, Big Hero 6 is a film that I actually thought I was going to rank lower before I rewatched it for this ranking. Because the thing about Big Hero 6 is it's one of those movies I fall asleep to almost every single time I watched it. And I almost fell asleep again on this rewatch, which you would think a movie that you fall asleep to isn't a good movie. Like Fantasia. Like I said, Fantasia is a great movie to fall asleep to because you'll hear the music in the background. And it ended up like in the bad tier because of that. Big Hero 6 I fall asleep to sometimes, but when I stay awake, when I did stay awake on this watch, I did notice that it's actually a really good story. Tadashi is actually a really, really likable character who gets killed off. Like, there's a lot of Disney movies where they'll kill off the inspirational figure right at the beginning, like they do Mufasa in The Lion King or Sitka in Brother Bear. There's a couple films where they do that. Oh, and I don't know if I talked about Bambi's mom dying when I talked about Bambi. But yeah, they do that in Bambi. That's like a big thing. A lot of people that resonates deeper, and they would put Bambi higher for that. For me, it was just kind of like, okay, that's dark. And it was like, I think that it was a good thing, because it was like the first time Disney did something like that. But it didn't hit me as deep as some other films, mainly because I've heard about it before, and I kind of had it spoiled that that Bambi's mom was gonna die. But anyways, that's back to Bambi. But back to Big Hero 6. So Big Hero 6, I think that it's a really good story about dealing with grief and loss and the struggles of it, and like how Hero basically like loses all his dreams. Like, he's ready to give up on everything that he was chasing after his brother dies. Is really, really heartfelt and really relatable, because like when people go through a loss like that, it's very common that they want to give up and that they don't really have much of a will to live anymore. And it's a darker reality, but it is a reality that so many people face. And I think because of that, it's a really good story. And I think one of the scenes I like the most is when Hero does find out who did it and who killed his mom, or who killed his brother, Tadashi. Or not killed him, but like didn't save him. Because Tadashi went in to save this guy, Professor Callahan. And then, he basically, Professor Callahan doesn't save Tadashi. He lets Tadashi die in this, burning building. Which is super dark. And the professor guy doesn't even care that Tadashi died. So Hero just gets to the point where he's just murder him. And so he changes Baymax's programming to become a murder robot, and it's just super dark, where he's just I just want to kill this guy because he let my brother die. And that's just insane, as he's trying to deal with this unforgiveness in his heart. And then near the end of the movie, Baymax is just reminding him yo, I wasn't created to destroy, I was created to help people. And you see Hero at the end get a lot better because of that. It really becomes a super heartfelt film. I think the things that bring it down a little bit for me is the movie's called Big Hero 6, and I would say there's about 4 of the 6 that I really like. I like Hero, I like Baymax, I like Honey Lemon, and I like Fred. The other 2 I don't really even remember the names of. I think one might be Wasabi or something. But they're kind of more forgettable. I don't think all 6 of the 6 really stick. And the other thing I think is a little bit of an issue with this movie is at the end, when Professor Callahan's daughter is still somehow trapped in this dimension. It just is a little convoluted. And also they undo the Baymax sacrifice by just having him come back at the end, which is, it's okay. I didn't really want Baymax to die, but the fact that he just comes back doesn't make it as heartfelt as it could be. So those reasons keep it out of amazing, but it is still a really great movie. I had Baymax as my MVP. It could have gone to Baymax or Hero. I think again, like all of the characters aren't super well written. There's a reason I've fallen asleep in this movie so many times before because I think that on the whole, like it doesn't really get me character wise as much. I do think the animation is really pretty though. But yeah, my MVP for Baymax, I have him as the 36th best MVP from the movie. So there you go. Big Hero 6, number 22 in my rankings. Dang, we're almost top 20. An hour and 40 in. Here we go. Next up, we got Treasure Planet at number 21. So Treasure Planet is my number 21. And it's number 21 mainly because... Man, Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet is a really good movie. Let me just talk about that real quick. So I'd never seen Treasure Planet before this. And I did not expect all that much from it because it was coming in the post-Renaissance period. This is like the same period that movies like Home on the Range and Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons and all these like Brother Bear, all these mediocre movies are happening. And I just watched Atlantis too, like right nearly before this. And Atlantis was a movie I'd heard so many good things about and I ended up hating it. So Treasure Planet was another movie I'd heard a lot of good things about, but I figured I was probably going to hate it. But on the watch through of Treasure Planet, I actually really, really, really enjoyed this movie. Like, it's almost in my amazing tier. It's right outside of it in the great tier here. But I loved Treasure Planet. I thought it was super well done. I thought the whole dynamic between Jimbo and Silver is one of my favorite, like, duos, I think, in Disney history. Just watching, like, this protagonist kid who just wants to be a treasure hunter, just wants to do something to prove that he's not a loser. And, like, this evil villain guy who is, like, this treasure hunter, just, like, kind of becoming a father figure in this life for this kid who lost his father at a young age. His father just left. And it's just, like, it's super relatable. I feel like it would connect with me even more if I was someone who had lost my father at a young age, because I know that's something that a lot of people go through. It's a very real struggle that people's fathers walk out on them and they need like that father figure in their lives. And so seeing Silver become that for Jimbo is so cool. And like the fact that he actually changed too. Like I think Silver is one of the best Disney villains, and the fact that like he stops being a villain. It's like he becomes the hero at the end. And I think that's just, it's so good to see a villain change from a villain to a hero. You don't see that a lot in a Disney movie, and I think that it works really, really well. I also just really think the animation of this movie is another level. Like, out of all the 2D animated films, this one and Tarzan are the two that, like, I always go to as the best 2D animated films of Disney's entire catalog. And I think that Treasure Planet really brings something so special in that way. Super big fan of it. I think what keeps it out of amazing for me is, for one, it lacks songs, and like a lot of, I know that's a little bit unfair to say like just because a movie doesn't have songs it's not as good of a movie, but when you're comparing it to Disney movies that do have songs really do help escalate a lot of the other films. And then I think another thing is the Ben robot that comes in near the end is a little bit annoying, like, and his art style does clash a little bit with the 2D animation. So I think Ben kind of brings the movie down a little bit. But overall, super good. I have Jimbo as my 13th best MVP of any Disney movie. So I really like Jimbo. I think he's super fun. And I think that the film as a whole is so good. Just outside my top 20 at number 21, Treasure Planet. And then my last movie in the great tier is Bolt at number 20. Bolt is a film I didn't expect to like as much as I did as well. It's another movie from the post-Renaissance. It actually comes right after Meet the Robinsons and Chicken Little, which were both a lot lower for me. But Bolt, I think, is a considerable step up. Like, something I said is, I think that Meet the Robinsons and Chicken Little both feel like DreamWorks movies, but Bolt, to me, it feels like a Pixar movie, actually. And Pixar is one of the best studios that Disney has. Like, so many good movies that Pixar makes. And Bolt kind of feels like one of those. It actually is like a very similar plot to Toy Story 2, is something that I heard somebody say. which I see a lot because, Bolt thinks he's this superhero, just like Buzz Lightyear thinks he's this superhero, but really he's just a toy, or really he's just a dog. And just going on this journey of self discovery, realizing what it truly means to be a hero. It's not having all these superpowers, it's just being somebody who is heroic in actions and the way that he loves people and the way that he loves Mittens and the way that he loves this hamster and the way that he loves his owner. Really, really heartfelt. And I think it's super intense at the end too, because it again brings back that theme of replacement that I was talking about with Lady and the Tramp, where Lady gets replaced by the baby. But I think this one hits deeper with Bolt, because Bolt goes on this entire long journey to get all the way home, only to find out that his owner literally bought a replica dog that is the exact same dog, just like, with the little logo tattooed on him. That's just like, frick, man. Like, that's so heartfelt and so sad. And then the even more heartfelt scene comes after that, when the burning building happens and his owner literally almost dies in the building, and then he gets to super bark up the vent. It's just like, dang, so good. Like, I really, really like that. And then I really like Mittens too. Mittens is actually my MVP, even as much as I like Bolt as the dog. I made Mittens my MVP as the 26th best MVP of any Disney movie. And I think that she's super good too. I really like Mittens' story of thinking that that humans are just gonna like abandon you, and that you can't really have a human who loves you. It kind of like gives me vibes of Jessie from Toy Story, actually, where Jessie in her second movie is just like, yeah, like humans, they're just gonna leave you, and Mittens kind of has that same mentality, feeling like, why are you going back to a human who's just gonna abandon you? And it's cool at the end, like when Penny adopts them all. I think her name's Penny in this movie too. It's interesting that, yeah, because I think Penny is the girl in The Rescuers, and I think Penny's also the girl in Bolt. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100%, but I think that it's the same name for the girl in both movies. So that's interesting. But yeah, so overall, I think that Bolt is the 20th best film. It's really well done. Lots of emotional moments. Lots of things you can connect with. It's the last movie in my great tier. So there we go. Bolt at number 20. We're down to the top 19. But before we go through them, let's recap the great tier. I'm just going to take a swig of water first. All right. Yeah. Talking by myself for 100 or an hour and 50 minutes takes a lot out of you. But it actually doesn't, though. Like, I'm still feeling pretty energized because of how much I love Disney. So here we go. Recap of the great tier. We have 25, Fox and the Hound. 24, Alice in Wonderland. 23, Peter Pan. 22, Big Hero 6. 21, Treasure Planet. And 20 is Bolt. There you go. So we're on to the top 19. And kicking off our amazing tier at the bottom is The Jungle Book at number 19. So Jungle Book for me is a super iconic film. I think it's one of the ones that I actually did watch in my childhood, because a lot of Disney movies I didn't really get into until my adulthood. Jungle Book, though, I remember watching as a kid, and it's iconic. Like, The Bare Necessities and I Want to Be Like You are two of Disney's best songs from the early days and even from all time. Also, The Jungle Book is known as being the last movie that Walt Disney was involved in making before he died. And that's a huge thing. It really like caps off a historical moment in Disney history for that reason. Yeah, and it's just a movie with a lot of really good characters, a lot of really good moments, and also the end when Baloo is kind of giving a very similar like Christ sacrifice, and they literally quote the Bible in this movie, which is something that really resonates with me, where they say there's no greater love than to lay down a life for your friends. And I think that because of that biblical connection and that quote of just such a true statement is something that really elevates it for me and makes it one of the most amazing movies. Now, I will say it's at the bottom of the amazing tier for a reason. I think that my biggest issue with Jungle Book is the elephant scenes. I think the elephant scenes go on a little too long. Those characters are a little bit annoying, and I think the animation is a little bit subpar. and not that great even for the time. I think a lot of the other Silver Age films have even better animation, like Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, or even like Lady and the Tramp. I think probably has better animation than The Jungle Book, but I think the characters and the songs and the story and the morals, all that makes up for it and lands it at number 19. I have Baloo as my most valuable player here, and I have him as the 11th best of all the most valuable players in Disney history. So, really strong MVP and Baloo. He's a lot of fun. Bare necessities of life will come to you. There you go. Baloo at number 11, Jungle Book at number 19 in the amazing tier. And we have number 18, which is Moana. So Moana is a movie that is super recent. And I actually had Moana as the prettiest Disney movie. Out of all 59 of these, I think it has the best animation. I think that might be because I'm a sucker for water. Because water is my favorite thing ever in real life. And to see really, really good animated water like they have in Moana really, really gets me. The characters in Moana, I think, are good. But to be honest, I think it's a little bit of a weak point. The movie starts really well, where I really like Moana's character. But as the movie goes on, she gets really annoying to me when she's just like, I am Moana Montanui, like, get on my boat, blah, blah, blah. And I think really what turns Moana into a more annoying character is her grandma, which is another one of my bigger problems with this film, is I think the grandma is just really annoying. It gets a little bit more into spiritism, just like Pocahontas. Which can be really annoying, like this reincarnation stuff and being inspired by your dead grandma to cross the ocean. It's just a little bit convoluted. But I do like How Far I'll Go. That song is super good. I love You're Welcome. Lots of good music in this movie. I think Moana, in just the idea of her goal is pretty relatable. It's relatable, the idea of like, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Like, I feel like I'm obligated to be where I am, but I'm feeling called somewhere else. Like, that's something that I've related to a lot in, like, when I went to missionary college. I felt like, and even like right now when I'm in Waukesha, I'm just home in my hometown. I've been here for so long that it feels like I'm ready to be called out to something new. And I think that is a very relatable heart struggle that Moana has in the movie. But again, I think that the characters really get annoying at certain points. Moana and even Maui. Like when Maui just like randomly abandons Moana, it's just so out of character. And then at the end when he just shows up, that's even like more random to save the day at the end. Like, because he abandons her, but then he just randomly shows up again at the most convenient, like plot convenient moment. It's just a little random in a lot of different spots. My MVP for the movie is actually Tamatoa. But he still only lands in respectable as the 37th best MVP of all Disney movies. So that kind of tells you like what I think about just overall the characters in Moana. I think they're a severe step down from most of these other films in the amazing tier. But even with a weaker cast of characters, I think that the animation and the music are some of Disney's all-time best, which lands it as the number 18 best film of all time. So there you go. And we move to number 17, which is Robin Hood, which is actually another film from the Disney Dark Age. It came right after Aristocats and before Winnie the Pooh, or the original Winnie the Pooh. And Robin Hood for me was a huge surprise. I did not expect to like Robin Hood as much as I did, because I've heard things about it, like how it ripped off a lot of animation sequences from other movies, like it just painted over them with different characters and stuff like that. And to be honest, I didn't really notice or care. I really liked Robin Hood a lot. I thought Robin Hood and Little John were really, really good protagonists. And just the principle of the movie, I think, is something that is really cool. Like the idea of stealing from the rich to give to the poor, I think is a really good principle of like just the hearts behind Robin Hood and his companion, like that they're doing this to help the poor. Like they want to take from these snobbish rich people who think that they're entitled to all this money and to give it to people who don't have that privilege. And it's just so heartfelt. Every moment where Robin Hood is helping the poor out, he's giving his heart to them, he's loving them. It's really amazing. I super appreciate it. And specifically, there's also like really dark moments near the end when they're about to hang the church guy, like because the church guy won't give the church's money to the rich because the rich are starting to tax the freaking church out of all of its money. That's crazy dark stuff, and it's really powerful how Robin Hood is like standing against the shenanigans where they're about to hang the church dude. Like that stuff is nutso, and I think the story's told really well in that regard. I do think the animation lacks a little bit, and I think the part where Robin Hood like looks like he might have drowned or whatever at the end, like it's pretty unbelievable. Like it's pretty obvious that he didn't drown, so it's not like it doesn't catch you as big as some of the other heartfelt moments in films after this. But I would say that Robin Hood's a really good film. It's a really good film. It's in the amazing tier for a reason. I think it's amazing. Robin Hood as an MVP, I have as my 8th best MVP of any Disney movie. I think he's a really good title character, and just again the way that he loves and helps the poor is so inspiring, and it's something that I think you can look up to and you can be inspired by to live a life of generosity and loving people who have less than you really well. So there you go. Robin Hood is my number 17 movie. Robin Hood's my number 8 MVP. So there we go. Then we move to number 16, which is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Another really, really, really good film. I think Hunchback of Notre Dame has some of the most intense emotional scenes in any Disney film. With stuff like Hellfire, and then like when Quasimodo is just like in the square getting like things pelted at him. Like I've heard people say that's like a parallel of Jesus on the cross, like just getting mocked and stuff, and I could totally see that. I think that's a really interesting parallel. I think Quasimodo is just like a really unique protagonist too, just because of the fact that he's not a prince, he's not attractive looking. He's just a normal guy, or perhaps an even under normal guy, who's told by the world that he's hideous, that he's a monster. But then you have Esmeralda, who's telling him like, no, I don't see any monster lines. Like I see you as beautiful. I see you as worthy. I see you as a great character. And I think that's really beautiful to see, like a message about, it doesn't matter what you look like because you are lovely as you are. And that's just like, it's so good. It's so good. It's such a heartfelt message. It's such a message of purity and beauty. Another song in this movie that really gets me, I mean, obviously there's Out There, and I already talked about Hellfire. Hellfire is like a really intense villain song. I don't really like it because it's a little dark for me, but Out There is a really good song from Quasimodo of just his dream to like get out in the world. And then my favorite song in the movie is God Help the Outcast, because as Esmeralda's singing about God helping the outcast, that's essentially my entire life's call, is to help the outcast. Like that's one of the biggest things that God's always put on my heart in my relationship with him, is that I have this desire to help the outcasts and people who don't really receive love from the world. And so because of that, I really appreciate Hunchback for the way that it brings that to the forefront. So I really, really love Hunchback, but there is a glaring issue with it. And I think the biggest glaring issue with Hunchback for me is Phoebus, to be honest, and the gargoyles. The gargoyles suck, and Phoebus sucks, because Phoebus steals Esmeralda from Quasimodo, and he doesn't get the girl. And it's a little relatable that way, because like the ugly guy doesn't usually get the girl, but it's still really sad that she just like, takes the more attractive dude and leaves him in the dust. And it's just like okay, like nobody was rooting for that, let's be honest. So that's really a frustrating component of it all. And the gargoyles suck and they're super annoying. So it has its flaws, but it's still my number 16 movie. And Esmeralda is my 20th best MVP. I really like her a lot. I think she's a really good character. In the way that she loves the outcast, I think she would be better if she didn't leave Quasimodo for some hunky guard dude, Phoebus. So, there you go. That's number 16 on my Disney rankings. I'm going to take another swig of water. Then we'll move on to top 15. All right. Number 15. We've got The Emperor's New Groove. The movie about Cusco. Yeah. Everyone's favorite llama, Cusco. So Cusco, for me, is one of Disney's all-time most interesting protagonists. And the fact that he's kind of an ass. So that's really fun. And like the whole movie, like it's almost like it's really interesting watching his journey of like going from being this terrible person to eventually getting to the point where he's like, you know what, like, you know, I'll be a little bit nice at the end. But he's not the highlight of the movie. The highlights of this movie is Pacha is really, really kind. And then you have Yzma and Kronk. And I think Yzma and Kronk are probably the best part of this movie. They're really fun as a villain dynamic. I think all four of the leads, though, work really well as characters. But I think this is probably one of the most entertaining Disney movies ever. I think the quotes in this movie are probably on another level than anything else in Disney history. There's so many good one-liners and jokes. It's literally one of the most hilarious movies ever. It's not emotional. It's not as emotionally touching as a lot of these other movies in the top 15, which is why it does fall this low. But I think if you want to laugh, this is probably one of the top 3 Disney movies to listen to or to watch if you just want to have a good time and laugh and enjoy yourself, because you will enjoy yourself a lot watching The Emperor's New Groove. The MVP for the film, I went with Kronk because I think he's so funny in his comic relief. I put him at 22, the 22nd best MVP from Disney. Really, really strong as a whole. Also, I'm noticing, I don't think I ever mentioned that. Oh, no, I did. Never mind. Okay. Sorry. I was just looking at something, but I think that I did mention that earlier. So, anyways, yeah. Kronk is the 22nd best MVP from Disney canon. I think that he's a pretty good, most valuable player. Really adds a lot to the film in comedy, and I think that the whole film is just comedic gold. So there you go. That is The Emperor's New Groove at number 15. And we have number 14 is Mulan. So Mulan comes in the Disney Renaissance right before Tarzan and right after Hunchback, I think, in order. No, I think it's after Hercules, actually, in order, but it's in that area of the Renaissance. Mulan is another, like, unconventional Disney princess. There's not really as much of a focus on the love interest as there's a focus on her journey of growth. And I think that Mulan is just really heroic in the way that she sacrifices herself for her father. And it's just a really, really cool step that she takes. And then she goes and she saves China. But there's also this thing of, like, she's having to pretend to be somebody else to be accepted, which is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. I think she's a good role model in that way. I also think that the moment when she gets rejected is pretty interesting, when they just leave her behind and she's feeling not good enough, and Mushu is feeling not good enough. Like, he's like, you know what, I wasn't supposed to come. I wasn't chosen. I just was like the reject of the Guardians. And then, like, it's funny to, like, they're like, the Lucky Cricket is like, I'm not even lucky. And so, like, that's really funny too. So just like everybody's feeling like, oh, I'm not what I'm supposed to be, but just being who you are. Like, instead of feeling like you have to live up to what you're supposed to be, being who you are and being a hero where you're at, again, is again a beautiful moral, beautiful story told in Mulan. It's a timeless classic. And then obviously we can't talk about Mulan without talking about I'll Make a Man Out of You, one of Disney's best ever songs in the history of Disney. It's so good. It's actually incredible. Yeah, I think pretty much everybody loves I'll Make a Man Out of You. It's a song I'll play in the car, mysterious as the dark side of the moon. It almost single-handedly puts this movie in the top 15. So yeah, on the whole, Mulan is amazing. And it also has Reflection and A Girl Worth Fighting For, which I think are also really fun songs. Like, it's got a really good song collection. And a lot of relatability, too. Like, I think one of the things that I really connect with is that Mulan, when she does decide to leave, and represent her father in the war, it's in a thunderstorm that she has that revelation, which connected with me because in a thunderstorm was when I had one of my first real moments of connection in my relationship with God. So that really connected with me too. As the MVP for the film, obviously I picked Mulan. Someone could argue Mushu, but honestly, Mushu annoyed me a little bit. I'm not gonna be honest. If I'm gonna be honest, I think he is not as likable as Mulan herself. So Mulan was my MVP, and she was the 17th best MVP of all of the MVPs on my ranking. So there we go. That is Mulan, number 14. Then we have number 13, which might be a little controversial of an opinion, but my number 13 is Ralph Breaks the Internet, which a lot of people don't like this as a sequel, and they would probably have it more in the 30s or 40s, but I really love Ralph Breaks the Internet. In fact, my MVP from this film is my favorite MVP in all of Disney, and it's Vanellope von Schweetz. And it's crazy because, like, I don't even like Vanellope that much in the first Wreck-It Ralph. But in this movie, I love Vanellope so much. I think her journey is so fun. As she's just kind of wanting more out of life than just going through the motions of going to her job every day. She wants something more. And I think that that's so relatable to me personally. And what's even more relatable to me personally is the friendship dynamic between Ralph and Vanellope. And the reality of having to leave that friendship behind as they go different directions in life is something that I have experienced on a personal level so much in the past few years with going to college. It's really sunk deep as I've had to leave friends behind every time I've gone to college, and there's been like these stresses on my heart, and I can relate to Ralph's insecurity in the movie as well, in the ways that he is so insecure about losing his friend. He's so scared, like, if she moves on to a new thing, like, is she gonna forget about me? Is she gonna replace me? Like, it's super real and super raw and super relatable, and something I can connect with on a deep and personal level in a way that I can't do with a lot of other Disney films. Now, I will say that I think Ralph is overblown written at some points where it's like, okay, this seems almost unrealistic how insecure he is, but as somebody who's been almost that insecure in my life, I can understand it a lot more than people who haven't experienced that and are just looking at it from the outside. And I think because of that, I really appreciate this movie a lot. I think some of the internet jokes hit, some of them miss. But I think overall, like, the emotional storytelling in Ralph Breaks the Internet hits me deeper than almost any other Disney film altogether. And like where I was in my life watching this movie for the first time, like when I was actually leaving my friends behind, it was nuts. And I like that they, at the end of the movie, they actually do go different ways. Like, Vanellope doesn't just change her mind and say, like, Ralph, I'm gonna stay with you forever. Like, no, they make the mature choice of going separate ways. And, you know, at the end, they're just talking to each other on the phone. And that's like what it was like when I was at college. Like, you know, my old best friends I'd do everything with, now it was just phone calls and that's it. And like, that's just the reality of how friendships change. And it's so real. It's something you can connect with on such a deep level, which puts it at number 13 for me. Really good film. I super love Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Vanellope, like I said, my number one most valuable player of any film. I think she's so much fun, and the Disney princess scenes are also so fun in this movie. I think that's another reason she gets the MVP, because like the staring into the water, the slaughter race song, That stuff is so much fun for me, and I love that idea of just the silliness of it all. And I I I can't even put into words how much I love Vanellope and how much I love Ralph Breaks the Internet. It's such an amazing film. I would probably have it even higher if it wasn't a sequel, if it didn't have a few over the top jokes with, with Ralph's insecurity and a few of the internet things missing a little bit. But so good. I freaking love this movie. Yeah, we're getting to that point where everything left is so good. So anyways, we move to number 12, which is Frozen. The original Frozen, which is significantly better than Frozen 2. Anyone who likes Frozen 2 better than Frozen, I don't understand. The original Frozen is great. It's a great movie. It really is. Like, I will say, I think it still has weaker characters than most of modern Disney. Like, my MVP for this movie surprised me. I actually ended up going with Kristoff as my MVP, but he's only the 39th best MVP of all Disney movies, which is a really low MVP score. And you might be like, why Kristoff when there's Anna, there's Elsa, there's Olaf? But the problem with those two characters is they all annoy me in some ways that, like, I think Olaf is a little bit too childish. Anna, for me, is a little bit too skittish, and, like, she's really dumb at the beginning of the movie, where she's just kind of marry a dude she just met, and it's just, like, that's not really likable. Like, her whole plot in the movie is, like, getting back to this dude who doesn't even love her. And then Elsa I connect with a lot, but I think that the reason she's not my MVP is I feel like she doesn't get enough development. I think the movie really fails at giving equal time to Elsa and Anna. I think that it focuses too much on Anna, which is really bad. And, I'm saying all these negative things about Frozen. You might be wondering, why is it this high? It's because of the music. Like, the music in Frozen is one of the best soundtracks in all of Disney history. And I don't like Do You Want to Build a Snowman or the Ice song at the beginning, but stuff like For the First Time in Forever, Let It Go almost carries this movie on its own. It's a pop culture phenomenon, Let It Go is. And that song is so freaking good. It's on, like, another level of good. Another one I really like is Fixer Upper. I think is really underrated as a song. And then even, like, Love is an Open Door is another one that really, it's a super good tune. And it's catchy, it gets stuck in your head. You really appreciate it. You really enjoy it. So, on the whole of things, I think that Frozen has a lot of good music. And then there's also the sequence when Elsa's singing Let It Go and she builds her ice castle. The animation there is really, really, really good. I super appreciate that. And then you just can't ignore how this film really has had so much influence on pop culture. Then there's also the twist villain at the end with Hans, which the first time I watched it, I was like, whoa. But I think that Hans isn't really developed as well as other twist villains, which I think keeps it a little bit lower than some of the other ones that we'll see in the movies coming up ahead. And then I also think that, for me, then there's the last part of Frozen. I think this is another reason it's high, is it breaks off the Disney trope of a true love's kiss by making it about sisterly love. And I think that's a really, really good conclusion. And I think that's actually what brings this movie as high as it is. Because, like I said, the characters, a little weaker. I'm not as huge of a fan. And I do think that the storytelling could have had more balance telling between Anna and Elsa. But I think that the message of breaking off that true love's kiss Disney trope is so good that it brings it up, and the music brings it up, and it has animation that's great, which brings it up, and it's so transforming of the entire culture of the world, which brings it up. So it has all these amazing components, and yeah, it's weak in some areas. And like, going back to Ralph Breaks the Internet, because, like, there's part of me that's like, maybe Ralph Breaks the Internet should be above this, but I think that Ralph Breaks the Internet also does struggle. Like, even though I love Ralph and Vanellope as leads, I think the side characters in Ralph Breaks the Internet aren't as great either. So I do see, like, and the other thing is Ralph Breaks the Internet only has one song in The Slaughter Race versus Frozen has some of the best songs in the entire Disney canon. So I think as a whole, I do think Frozen deserves its spot over Ralph Breaks the Internet. Um, but it definitely lacks a little bit, keeping it from masterpiece for me. But it's number 12 here in the amazing tier. Now, we move to the top 11. So, I think the top 11 are all really, really, really good films. These next two are still an amazing, just outside of masterpiece, but I really love these next two films. So, number 11 is going to be the most recent Disney film, Raya and the Last Dragon. So Raya is super new. It's super fresh. I've watched it about 3 times in the last month because it's so new. But every time I watch it, I enjoy it. I really love Raya. As a protagonist, I have her as the 10th best MVP of any Disney film. So that just shows you how much I like her as a lead. And I think she's very relatable because she makes this big mistake of trusting somebody that she shouldn't have. And it creates these trust issues that she has throughout the whole movie and has to overcome. And I think that's so easy to relate to in real life because it's so easy to trust people in real life with your heart or with who you are, and then for them to leave you or abandon you or betray you. And I've experienced that on some level in some of my friendships in my life, and it's really tough. It's really tough to put your trust in somebody and to have them betray you, and then it makes it harder to open up, to trust new people, to build new relationships, to build new connections. And I just, every time I watch Raya, I love it more. Like, we've already talked about it on the podcast when we did the review with me and Dan and Ellie, but that was like right after we watched it for the first time. And at the end of the movie, I was kind of like asking Dan and Ellie, like, okay, like, where would you put this in your Disney rankings? So now I actually know where I would put it after rewatching everything. And it's 11. I think back then I was thinking it might be like middle. And I think like the biggest knock on Raya is the music. There's not really a lot for music. And you would think a Disney princess film would deliver more on music, but there's not a lot there. But it almost doesn't even need music because the storytelling is so good. And the idea about unity too, of just like all these parts of humanity, like humans being humans. They even talk about that. Humans being humans instead of just being united over this thing that's sacrificed for us all. Like, we're just going to get divided over it. And that's literally the church. The church, instead of being united over Jesus giving his sacrifice for us all, like, we're just divided. And it's so sad, but it's literally the reality of the church. And that's why I think this movie resonates with me so deeply. And I am passionately in love with Raya. It's above Frozen. It's above this milestone movie in the history of Disney because I think it's that good. And it's not going to get the love it deserves either. It's going to be underrated because it came out on a streaming service and you had to pay a $30 fee to watch it. And it's going to probably fade into obscurity, but I think that it's such a good film. It's not going to get the love it deserves, but Raya and the Last Dragon is one of my all-time favorites at number 11. Then we got number 10, which is The Princess and the Frog, baby. Also above Frozen. You know, these are two movies. Princess and the Frog and Raya are two movies that will never, ever, ever get as much love as Frozen because Frozen is just, it's so well known in culture and it's considered good, or it's not even considered good because I think Frozen's become so overrated that it's become underrated almost. Like, some people would put Frozen in like the bottom 10, and like some people even say Frozen 2 is better than Frozen because Frozen 1 is so overrated. I think Frozen 1 is good. Like, I still have it at 12. But I think these other two movies of Raya and Princess and the Frog are movies that are both going to get forgotten. Princess and the Frog gets forgotten because it's the last like 2D animation princess film. And then Raya is going to get forgotten because it just came out on a streaming service. But both of these two films have such good stories. I talked about Raya. Princess and the Frog, I love. Just for one, it's the only princess film that takes place in America, which I think makes it just fundamentally more relatable to an American audience because of that right off the bat in New Orleans. But then just the moral idea of Tiana being a character who has to work hard for what she gets, as opposed to other Disney princesses who just get it all handed them for being a princess. Like, Tiana really has to work for what she has in life. And then the fun take on the Princess and the Frog story is really cool too, where instead of like, you know, the frog kissing the princess and becoming a prince, the princess kisses the frog and becomes a frog, I think is a really good different direction to go with that storyline. And then you have Prince Naveen. And Prince Naveen is probably, like, he's my MVP of this movie. I have him as the 12th best MVP of any Disney movie because Prince Naveen, I connect with him a lot because, like, to be honest, I'm a little bit lazy. And I just like to have fun. Like, he's like, you know, he's playing his little ukulele all throughout the film. I just like, you know, I relate to playing the ukulele in my life. And I also just really connect with him not really knowing how to do all that much because, you know, my parents did a lot for me growing up. So, like, the scene where he's, you know, learning how to cook and chop stuff from Tiana, I relate to that a lot because I don't really know how to cook. Like, when I was in Ghana, my Ghana teammates were teaching me, like, the basics of how to cook eggs and potatoes and whatnot, and things that I've just never ever had to cook before because I just go to fast food joints or have my parents cook for me or make microwave stuff. And so because of that, I connect with Prince Naveen on that level in a super deep way. I also really, really like the songs in this movie. I think it has some of the best songs of any Disney film, and it's really underrated in its music. It's not as good as Frozen. Frozen is iconic for a reason, but there's so many good songs like When We're Human. I really, really love When We're Human. Friends on the Other Side is a really, really intense villain song, which is really fun. And then Dig a Little Deeper, the song that the grandma sings, is really good. And it's a really good message that, like, what you think you want might not be what you actually want. And I've seen that so many times in my own life. That what I think I want in life and what I actually want in life tend to be very different very often. And I think that really all those different elements coming together make Princess and the Frog almost a masterpiece. It's here at the very top of amazing tier, right on the edge of masterpiece. I think what maybe keeps it a little bit out of masterpiece for me is just the fact that it is, I think the animation is, not to say that, I mean, it is like the last 2D animation, but I think that's a little bit lesser. I think that I also just really like Ray's death in this movie, and even Facilia's death are super deep. Oh, you know what it is? It's Charlotte. Charlotte's what's bring this movie down for me. Yeah, Charlotte. I don't like Charlotte at all. And Charlotte is the girl that is Tiana's friend, the blonde girl. I really don't like her. Any scene that she's in, I just really can't stand those scenes. And I think that's what keeps me from putting it as a full-on masterpiece. But Princess and the Frog is my number 10 movie. It's in my top 10. But it is out of the masterpiece tier just barely. So there we go. That's number 10. The Princess and the Frog. So now let's recap the amazing tier. From number 19, we have number 19, The Jungle Book. Number 18, Moana. Number 17, Robin Hood. Number 16, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Number 15, The Emperor's New Groove. Number 14, Mulan. Number 13, Ralph Breaks the Internet. Number 12, Frozen. Number 11, Raya and the Last Dragon. And number 10, The Princess and the Frog. Now we're on to the best of the best, folks. Number 9 is The Lion King. Now, I know some of you are going to say, Lion King is the best, it's number 1, blah, blah, blah. And to be honest, like, I think Lion King is severely overrated. And to be honest, I almost did want to put it below stuff like Princess and the Frog and Raya, because, like, I think on a personal level, I almost prefer stuff like Princess and the Frog and Raya. But I think that you can't say Lion King isn't a masterpiece, because it is. It is a masterpiece. It's literally the best rated Disney film for a reason. It's the one that most people love. It's the one that most people have childhood moments with, that grow up with. The songs are iconic. You got Hakuna Matata. You got Can You Feel the Love Tonight. You got I Just Can't Wait to Be King. You got Circle of Life. Some of the best music in Disney's history. You have iconic characters like Timon and Pumbaa and Simba. And I actually went with Rafiki for my MVP at number 25. I think that overall the characters are iconic. I will say for me, though, I think that I don't love them as much as other movies' characters, just because I think it's harder to connect with animal protagonists for me, and I think that a lot of their designs just don't really pull me in as much. Um, I think one thing that for me brings down the animated Lion King is I saw Lion King for the first time ever actually on Broadway. Before I ever saw the animated one, I saw the Broadway version. The Broadway version adds in the song "He Lives in You," which is in The Lion King 2, and that's my favorite piece of the entire Lion King story is the concept of him living in you, because I think that parallels itself so much to the Holy Spirit living inside of us, because after Jesus died, it made it so the Holy Spirit could live in us, kind of how in the movie Simba supposedly has like Mufasa and the kings of the past living inside of him when Mufasa dies. And so I think that's the biggest thing that really connects with me about the movie. And in the animated version, they really don't focus on that as much. Like they do have the one scene where like Mufasa's in the clouds and like he's looking in the water and like remembering Mufasa. But I think because of the fact that I saw the Broadway version and liked that so much more than the animated version, it brings the animated version down for me a little bit when compared to some of these other movies that we're going to get into next. So overall, like I really respect Lion King. I love Lion King, and the Broadway version of Lion King is one of my favorite things I've ever been to in my life for the way that it connected with me on that spiritual level. And also, like, something else I think we should talk about is Rafiki. The reason why Rafiki is the MVP is because his quotes about the past. Like, you can run from your past, or you can learn from your past. And that's something that I've dealt with in my life, too. I've had a really hard past in a lot of ways. I've lost a lot of friends. I've had a lot of things in my life that would make me feel like I don't belong or I'm not good enough. And those things are things that, I can just run from and I can forget about, or I can learn from those things and I can look deeper into myself, dig a little deeper, like Princess and the Frog said. And, this movie really challenges you to dig deep into those hurts of your past. Like, Simba blaming himself for losing his dad. Like, I blamed myself for losing friends in my life. But you have to work through that. You have to get back to the heart of healing. You have to deal with that thing inside of you that it's easier to ignore and say Hakuna Matata, no worries. But if it's actually bothering you, you gotta bring it to the surface. You gotta be honest about it. And The Lion King really, really puts that message on forefront and on display in a way that makes it a masterpiece. Like, it really is a masterpiece. Like, even though I have it at the bottom personally because I prefer the Broadway version to the animated one, I can't say Lion King isn't a masterpiece. It's one of Disney's best for sure. So there you go. Number 9 is The Lion King. Now we have the top 8. So number 8 is Lilo and Stitch. So Lilo and Stitch I just saw for the first time a few years back with my friend Allie. That was the first time I ever saw it at her house. And Lilo and Stitch is a movie that, like, one quote from that movie has gone on to define my life. And it's Ohana means family, and family never gets left behind or forgotten. And the whole principle of Ohana, in my opinion, is the principle of the family of God, right? Because in the family of God, nobody ever gets left behind or forgotten. That's Jesus' heart, is that everybody would become a part of the family. And I literally wrote a worship song called The Spirit of Ohana because I think the Holy Spirit is that spirit of unity, that spirit of family, that spirit of nobody gets left behind or forgotten. And that principle alone in this movie gets me so deep every single time. And then you have the characters, mainly the 3 leads of Stitch, Lilo, and Nani. And Stitch is great in the way the ugly duckling stuff, where he's just like looking at the ugly duckling, wanting a place to belong, finding belonging. For me, that hits so deep in my life, because I've always struggled a lot with belonging, but specifically this movie deals with it in such a powerful way as Stitch is finding this place to belong. Like, he feels like he didn't have that, but then he's able to find it, and that's something that I empathize with on such a deep personal level. Then on top of that, you have Lilo, who's such a fun kid character. Like at the beginning when she's talking about Pudge the fish, and she's just so out there and awkward and goofy and like likes Elvis for some reason. Like just these strange addictions. And like I can relate because I have strange addictions in my life that have made me an outcast. And so she's super relatable. And then you have Nani, who I actually give Nani the MVP out of them, even more than Lilo or Stitch, as my number 5 MVP of all of Disney. Because Nani is so relatable as an adult. I think that as a kid, I probably would have made Lilo or Stitch my MVP, but now that I'm more of an adult, I can relate to Nani because she's trying to be the big older sister because of their parents being dead. And she's doing everything she can to support and to love Lilo. And yet she's coming up short and she's struggling to the point where like she's going to lose her sister because she's trying to balance this job and watching this new dog and like and also like David's trying to flirt with her the whole time too, and she is just struggling so hard, but yet she's still trying her best and doing all that she can to support her sister and her family. But you see the realism in her. Like she gets frustrated, she gets those raging fits because like obviously you would get those raging fits if you were in that stressful of a life situation. Like she's real, more real than a lot of the Disney princesses who just seem to have it together all the time. So that's all really, really good. I think the thing that keeps this movie out of like a top 5 spot is mainly just the flaws in the pacing a little bit, and just there's a little bit too alien space nonsense, a little bit too much of that. And if there was a little bit less alien space nonsense and more stuff with the sisters and Stitch, and just like the belonging aspect and the dealing with grieving aspect, it could probably be top 5 or even top 3 maybe. But I think that there's a little bit too much nonsensical space stuff that happens in the film that keeps it out of the top 7 for me. But yeah, I love it. It's also in Hawaii. And Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride is one of my favorite songs. Like I listen to it in the car all the time while I'm door dashing. I really just, I get that feeling. I want to go to Hawaii. I want to be like, I've always wanted to surf too. So just like watching the surfing scenes is really fun. It gets me excited about the prospect of like, I could be a surfer someday. It would be so much fun. So that's just like, it gets me super amped. And I hope that one day I can surf just like Lilo and Stitch and Nani. And yeah. But yeah, the one scene about Nani again too, I want to talk about before I finish this off is like the scene where she's about to lose Lilo and like, Cobra Bubbles or whatever gives her this really interesting quote where he's basically saying like, you know, sometimes you have to realize that somebody you love, their life might be better with you out of the picture. And that's just like a really interesting quote. And it doesn't really play out in the movie because Nani and Lilo actually do end up in the same picture at the end and they get united and it's a happy family. But I think that quote hit me deep too as this guy was saying it to Nani because like in real life, sometimes that is the truth. Sometimes it is true that somebody you love, like in order for their life to be better, you have to take yourself out of their life and let them live it on their own. And that's just like really, really hard and deep to process. And you know, and as like Nani and Lilo are trying to process that on the hammock when they're realizing like, oh, we might be separated, like it's really, really, it's heartfelt and it's something that you can feel the depth in, and I can empathize with that because there's been moments in my friendships where I've been like, man, maybe the best thing for this friend is if I'm not super close to them anymore, and it's hard to realize that and it's hard to accept that. And again, like Lilo and Stitch, it just emotionally touches you in a way that almost no other movie does, which is why it ends up at number 8. So then we move to number 7, where I have Tarzan. Now, it's funny because like after going on like those big emotional rants about like Lilo and Stitch and Lion King and Princess and the Frog and Raya and Ralph Breaks the Internet, like those 5 movies all emotionally so deep. Tarzan is interesting because I think what is so interesting and likable about Tarzan is the simplicity of it. Like the love story in Tarzan is the most primitive, I think, of any Disney love story. It's literally just 2 people who don't even speak the same language, meeting in the forest and just like falling in love. And I don't know why it touches me so much. Like, it's just so simple in its nature, the love story between Tarzan and Jane, that it almost gets me deeper than almost any other love story in Disney. Like, I love it for the simplicity of it. And I think that the reason Tarzan is a movie I enjoy so much is because of that simple nature behind it. And yet it also feels like it has such a grand scale because of the animation. The animation is so good. It's my favorite Renaissance movie for animation by a long shot. As Tarzan's like surfing on the vines, and just like the chemistry between him and Jane feels so real every moment. I also really like the songs in this movie. I know some people don't like Phil Collins and it brings this down for them, but for me, I love Son of Man. I love Two Worlds, One Family. I love Strangers Like Me, and I love You'll Be in My Heart. It's just like, it's got a lot of songs that I really like, really enjoy, and connect with. And I think that it actually works well to put the songs over the montages in this movie. A lot better than in, like, say, Brother Bear, where they put the songs over the montages. Like, and it doesn't work. I think here it works a lot better. Yeah, and then my MVP for the movie at my number 9 in my MVPs is actually Jane. I think Jane is a really fun female protagonist. And it's just fun to watch her like struggle between like, should I go back to England or should I stay on this island with this guy? And live with the monkeys, and like she decides to live with the monkeys, and it's so heartfelt. Clayton as a villain, again, is a little simple, but I think because the love story is simple, I think that it works. I think it works to have a simple villain in Clayton, like with very vanilla motivations of just like, I want to get rich by taking these monkeys home and, you know, shooting them up and using their fur to sell for money. Like, it's a very simple motivation, but I think that because the movie's heart is so simple, like a simple villain fits with a simple love story. I think this is a great movie to show a kid, like, who can't really empathize with the deep themes maybe as much of things like Lilo and Stitch or Lion King or Princess and the Frog or Raya. I think Tarzan is just like a simple, fun movie to enjoy. There's maybe not as much relatable depth to it, but there is a little bit, because like Tarzan has those thoughts of like, I don't know if I belong because I'm different. Like, he's the one human in a pack of monkeys, so clearly there's something that sets him apart, that makes him different, that makes him an outcast, which is something I find in a lot of these of my favorite movies. But it's obviously not as focused as some of the other films that do that outcast focus, so it's not quite as relatable in that particular sense. But I think that the animation, the songs, the storytelling, it's so good, and even though it's a more simple story, it's a beautiful one, which lands it at my number 7. All right, folks, so we're coming up on our final 6, and we're gonna start the 6 with The Little Mermaid. So I love The Little Mermaid a lot. It's such a freaking good film. So the funny thing about The Little Mermaid is it kicks off the Disney Renaissance. Most people consider this the movie that saved Disney, because this comes right after the Dark Ages, after they lost all that money, after Walt Disney died, all this crazy stuff. Like, Little Mermaid was like the last chance. If Little Mermaid didn't perform, Disney might not exist today. It really probably would have got bankrupt. Every movie that came after Little Mermaid probably wouldn't exist. So that's one thing. But then also, this movie is gorgeous. I love the animation. Now, it still has its quirks, and it's, you know, you can still tell it's an 80s, 90s Disney movie. It's obviously not on par with some of the more modern stuff, but for the time, incredible animation. And the characters in Little Mermaid are some of my favorite of all time. Because you have Flounder, you have Sebastian, you have Triton, you have Ursula, you have Ariel, you have, I think those are like the main 5 of the ensemble. I guess you have Prince Eric too, which, again, Prince Eric, this was the first Disney princess film since Sleeping Beauty, in order. And Prince Eric is a big step up from Prince Philip, in the sense that, like, he actually gets more development. You get to spend more time with the prince for the first time in a Disney film, and you actually get to know his side of the story a little bit more. And here's the thing about this movie is, like, historically, like, the first few times I watched The Little Mermaid, I always kind of looked at it as like, okay, this movie has terrible morals because Ariel, in the film, Ariel doesn't really develop as a character, right? She basically remains exactly the same the entire film. She doesn't really learn a lesson. She just gets what she wants because her father sacrifices herself from her at the end, and Eric kills Ursula. So, you know, Ariel doesn't really accomplish much or change that much throughout the film, which is a glaring issue you could see with it. But I think it works because I don't think Ariel needed to change for the story they were trying to tell. And I think that actually Triton's sacrifice for Ariel is something that I like a lot more on the rewatch as I was watching it this time through. Because again, I think it's a Christ parallel because Ariel sins, she makes this mistake, makes a deal with the devil, has to face the consequences, just like we would have to face the consequences of sin for our mistakes. And yet, you know, the God figure in Triton steps in, gives that life for him, or for Ariel, and it ends up saving the day. And I think that is really cool how it all works out and how we're able to see Ariel get her happy ever after. And the other thing is, like, I know one issue I used to have with the movie too is that Ariel's just doing all this for a guy. But to be honest, like, I think that before it was all about the guy, like, when she had this fascination with the human world way before she met Eric. Like, it wasn't just about the guy. And the other thing is, like, she actually saves Eric's life way before she tries to pursue him. Just out of the kindness of her heart, like, wanting to save this dude who's about to drown. Like, when his ship goes down and he's drowning, she brings him to shore, saves his life. And that's kind of where everything starts, is that she saves this dude's life. Like, I think it's important to remember that side of it, because I think it's easy to look at Ariel as just like this dumb girl who makes all these mistakes, but she literally saves a dude's life at the beginning of the movie, which I think gets overshadowed by her dumb decisions to make the deal with Ursula as things go on. So that's one thing. And I actually do have Ariel as the MVP, but I only have her at number 15 because as much as I love her character, I do see that she doesn't develop as much. So she's a little bit weaker, but still the 15th best MVP of any Disney film. I love her. But let's talk about the biggest thing in this movie, which is the songs. Because Under the Sea, Part of Your World, and Kiss the Girl might be like the best trio of Disney songs of all time. Like, those three songs together, and then you have Poor Unfortunate Souls. It's kind of like a fourth there. But those four songs make this movie so iconic. And especially Under the Sea. Like, Under the Sea is one of my favorite songs to play on ukulele or piano or just to listen to in the car. So much fun. Part of Your World is a song that you can empathize with in the sense of, like, you know, when, like, if there's, like, I've empathized with it in the sense that there's been places in life I've wanted to go where I haven't been, and I can understand that idea from Ariel of wanting to go somewhere that you aren't. And then Kiss the Girl is just fun. Like, it's a little seductive, honestly, like, in the sense of, like, la 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 la, kiss the girl. Like, it's a little intense, but as you're watching it in the movie, it just, like, it gets you emotionally engaged and you want them to kiss so bad. And so, like, when the boat flips over, it's like, like, you really feel that hate for Ursula, and you're really engaged and sucked into it. Or if you don't like Ariel, you're like the other way where you're like, yay, Ursula, like, the boat flipped. So, like, either way, it's like you care a lot in that scene. It gets you emotionally, and I think that is why I really love The Little Mermaid. The music in this movie is like some of the best of all time. The characters are really fun. Oh, and I didn't even mention Scuttle. Scuttle's fun, like when he's telling Ariel all, like, the lies about what all these different human things are, and then she gets, like, these weird ideas of, like, you know, like what these different thingamabobs are, and it's really fun. Like the Snarfblat, I don't even know what all the rest of them are, but it's an incredible film, very well deserved of the number 5 or number 6 spot on my list. So there we go. We're almost at 3 hours, and we're down to the final 5. So in alphabetical order, the last 5 are Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, and Zootopia. So you guys can put your guesses in of what's going to be number one. But I'm going to say my number 5 right now is Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast is my number 5 Disney film of all time. So Beauty and the Beast, actually, I'm a little surprised it got as high as it did. Because, like, there are a lot of glaring issues with the animated version of Beauty and the Beast. And I actually would probably say I prefer the live action. Though I also have some issues with the live action version. Like, I really don't like all the Paris stuff they do in the live action one. It's a little much, like with the dead mom. I do like the live action one a little better in some ways, though, because in the live action, they explain a lot better why all of the Beast's, like, servants became different, like, cooking supplies and stuff like that, household items. That's not really explained in the animated version, and it's also not explained, like, much about this enchantress who changed the Beast into a beast. So that stuff's a little bit not as great, but I have some really fun memories of Beauty and the Beast. Like, I remember one of the first times I ever saw this movie was actually in French class, because in French class in high school they forced us to watch the Beauty and the Beast to learn French, because the movie takes place in Paris, and so you're able to connect with that. So they played us the French version of the movie, and that was just really funny for me. But character wise, like, I think this is one of the better princess movies. Like, so this is the one that immediately actually follows The Little Mermaid in progression, and I think this is the first Disney princess who really, of all of the Disney princesses up to this point, because Belle was the 5th after Ariel being the 4th, and I think Belle is the first Disney princess you can say confidently is like a strong woman with a lot of value and no real issues in her character story. In fact, she's not even looking for a prince at the beginning. She's simply like a girl who likes to read books, is living her life. Like, this dude Gaston wants to be her prince, but she doesn't want anything to do with him. And the whole reason she ends up in this romance with the Beast is because she gives herself up for her father. She's basically Mulan before Mulan. And I think that is so cool. Belle for me is one of the best Disney princesses, and like, she is also so patient with the Beast too. Is something I also love. Like, some people say, like, her falling in love with him is like Stockholm syndrome, like falling in love with your captor. But I don't see it that way at all. I feel like she's just like really patient, really loving, really kind. She sees this guy who, even though, I mean, they have a lot of tension at the beginning, understandably, because he kidnapped her father. But once he saves her life, like, she sees the potential in him. She sees that he's not a bad guy. And so she gives him a chance to change and to grow, and she helps him where he's weak and where he doesn't have it all figured out. And I think that is just so beautiful to see and to witness. A girl giving a guy who is more beastly this chance to grow and to change. And the Beast is really cool in the way that he does grow and he does change. And the part with the Beast that I empathize with the most is at the end, when, you know, when Belle's father is getting harassed by Gaston, and the Beast, like, he learns that the most powerful form of love is being willing to let somebody go and willing to let them be without you. Like, because the most true form of love isn't just clinging to a person and forcing them to be your own. The truest form of love is giving them freedom to be what they want to be. And, you know, if they really love you, they'll want to be with you. But if they don't want to be with you, then it's not love to keep them with you. And that's something that has been really powerful in my relationship with God too, because I've seen that as God's biggest heart value. Like, God doesn't force us to be in love with him or in relationship with him at all. God's number one value is freedom. He values our freedom more than he values us being with him. And obviously he wants us to be with him, but he wants us to be free more than that. And that's like something that the Beast learns throughout this movie, when he learns that, you know, I have to let Belle be free. And to choose that I have to give her the choice to not be with me in order for her being with me to mean something. And that's the truth of love, is it's like, you know, you have to give the freedom of that choice. And that's so powerful. I empathize with that super deeply. And I love this story so much. I have Belle as my number 7 MVP of all of Disney, all the different movies. I think she's a really good princess. I think the Beast is a really good other protagonist who's learning a lesson along the way. And I think Gaston as a villain, even though his motivations are really stupid, like the fact that he just wants to marry the prettiest girl in town so he can be Gaston and be all manly and whatever. Yeah, and then he's like trying to get the father hooked into an insane asylum, and the fact that the guy who owns the insane asylum is like falling for this is just like super corrupt. Like, why is this guy in charge of the insane asylum when he's like willing to accept bribes to check people in? That's just really messed up. But it's crazy. And then the songs in this movie are good. I don't actually like the songs here as much as Little Mermaid, but like I think the Belle song at the beginning is really good. Obviously, Beauty and the Beast, Tale as Old as Time is a really good song. Be Our Guest, I think, is decent. I don't like it as much as like Under the Sea or some other Sidekick songs. Even like Princess and the Frog songs, I like a couple of them better. But I think that overall, like it's a good soundtrack. And then the Kill the Beast song and the Gaston song. Like, there's a lot of really good songs in this movie, which is why it lands at number 5. It's a super good film, super good message, super great protagonist of Belle and the Beast, and overall, very worthy of the number 5 spot in my opinion. So there we go, number 5, Beauty and the Beast. All right, we're down to the final 4. Number 4 has to go to Wreck-It Ralph. So Wreck-It Ralph, for me, is one of the best Disney films of all time. It's another one I think I saw for the first time with my friend Allie a few years ago. That and Lilo and Stitch. And Wreck-It Ralph, I mean, it debuts the characters I talked about a little bit earlier in Ralph Breaks the Internet. But Wreck-It Ralph is the debut of them. And I just love this story because it's a story of a villain. It's a story of being told from the perspective of the quote-unquote villain, right? You know, Ralph's programmed as this bad guy video game character, but he wants to be something else. He wants to be the hero of the movie, or he wants to get a medal for once. He wants to change. And I think that just that desire to change is really beautiful to see. That desire to be a hero from somebody who's supposed to be bad is really beautiful. And then I also love that this film doesn't focus on a romance, but instead on a friendship. Because I don't think there's as many Disney movies about friendships, but I think this is one of the best of them. There's one that's better that we'll talk about in a little bit, but I think this is one of the best Disney movies on a friendship ever told between Ralph and Vanellope as they meet. And originally they're at odds with each other, but then they realize they're both kind of outcasts. They're both kind of the rejects in their games that nobody really likes or values. It's a story of outcasts coming together and learning the value of their friendship. And then you also have such a good storyline. I think this is probably one of, if not the best storylines in the entire Disney canon. Specifically with the villain. I think the villain here is done so well with King Candy and Turbo. And the way that Turbo is foreshadowed from the first meeting where Ralph's talking with like Bad Guys Anonymous to the very end, like, and then Turbo comes up and it's actually like, whoa, King Candy was Turbo the whole time and nobody knew. That was an insane plot twist. It makes the movie have so much rewatch value because you can look and pick up on all those hints as you watch it back a couple times. And King Candy's just an incredible villain. It's the best case of a twist villain, I think, in all of Disney is with Wreck-It Ralph. Hands down for me. Also, the side characters are great in Fix-It Felix and Calhoun. I think that they really have a lot of good scenes as well. Fix-It Felix is just a really fun, goofy guy. I almost made him the MVP of the film, honestly, like on the rewatch. But it's still Wreck-It Ralph. as my number 4 MVP overall. Now I gave Vanellope and Ralph Breaks the Internet my number 1, so they're both really good. I think that this film it it falls a little shorter as far as the characters, I think, because it's not as relatable of a story about going separate directions. It's more just like these two bad characters realizing that together they can be good and that they can have friendship. And it's just a lot about identity too, and like Ralph realizing like even if I'm programmed as a bad guy, even if this one little girl likes me, how bad can I be? Like that's the quote at the end of the movie, and just realizing what's important, putting his value in the opinion of that one little girl. It's not about what everybody thinks of him. It's just about knowing who he is inside and having just that one person who does value him. And same way that we have to know that God is that one person that values us, even if nobody else likes us. So that just really hits me deep. I love Wreck-It Ralph. And the other scene I really like in the movie is when King Candy manipulates Ralph into thinking that he has to destroy Vanellope's go-kart. Because that scene is just so emotionally touching when he is like destroying her go-kart, but he's doing it because he thinks that's the only way to save her. And it's like a hard truth moment, because like those moments sometimes happen in life where the only way to love your friend well is to hurt them, like to do that. And it's really hard. And like in a world where King Candy was telling the truth, like that would have been a really intense moment where Ralph's doing this to protect Vanellope, but she doesn't understand. And sometimes in life and in our friendships, we can have those moments where we have to do something to our friend that they might not understand and that'll hurt them, but it's for the best. And so that was another scene that really hit me deep. There's a lot of good stuff in this film, and overall, Wreck-It Ralph is my number 4 Disney film of all time. So there we go. We're down to 3. We got, alphabetically wise, it's Aladdin, Tangled, and Zootopia as our top 3 Disney films of all time. Number 3 is going to my favorite film from the Disney Renaissance, Aladdin. So Aladdin, for me, has to be one of the best. I think one of the most entertaining films of all of Disney, and also has one of the best casts of characters. I think I might have given Aladdin the highest character score of any film, because I think every supporting character in Aladdin is gold. Like, Abu and Carpet and Jafar and Iago and the Sultan and Jasmine and Aladdin, like they all add something so rich to the movie. And then like you have the genie. Now a lot of people, I've seen reviews of Aladdin who say like the genie makes the movie. I think the genie's a part of the movie. I don't think it makes the movie. I think the movie's great every moment before the genie shows up, and every moment the genie's not in, it's still a freaking good movie. Now the genie is kind of like the main plot of the movie, obviously. But I think the love story between Aladdin and Jasmine is actually my favorite part of the movie. And like we just came off Beauty and the Beast, so this film actually comes out next in progression, and I think it's better. I think that, well, maybe not better. I think the love story in Beauty and the Beast is really good, really really good. And I think Aladdin and Jasmine's story is also really 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 good and relatable, and Aladdin's struggle with being himself, I think, is also super relatable, because it's so easy in life to just want to be what other people want you to be to impress them. But really, it's when he learns to be himself that he's able to grow and he's able to progress as a character. And in real life, it's learning to be your true self and not just who other people want you to be that creates that difference. So there's that relatability aspect with Aladdin. There's also the comedy aspect with Genie. And then there's Jafar, Jafar might be the best Disney villain of all time. Because he's a lot of fun. Now, I will say there are a few plot holes in this movie, like why is Aladdin the diamond in the rough? That's not really explained super duper well. And the 3 wishes are a little bit janky in the way they're executed a little bit. But I think that those things are very forgivable because of the great cast of characters, because of how entertaining things are from the very beginning to the very end. And the music, again, one of my favorite soundtracks. I think my favorite Disney song of all time might be A Whole New World. it's so good. Just going on that magic carpet ride and singing this song about a whole new world, and it hits me deep because I remember when I was in Ghana, the very first week in Ghana, me and my teammates Haley and Sam, the three of us were in the back of our site leader's truck driving down the African road singing that song, and I empathize with it deeply because we were in that whole new world, that whole new world of Africa, and it's really cool how God was taking me into that whole new world, and now I can empathize with that song in a different way. But in the movie, it's also just incredibly placed. And then you also have like Prince Ali, you have A Friend Like Me, you have One Jump Ahead. Incredible soundtrack, great movie from bottom to top, one of the most entertaining of all time. I have Aladdin as the sixth best of the MVPs. I think he's a great character, very relatable, very easy to connect with and to enjoy. And, he's the title character. The movie's named after him, and rightfully so. It's a great film. So that is my number 3, Aladdin. Brings us to the top 2. And these are probably the movies I've seen the most too. Which was interesting because like on the rewatch I was like, am I still gonna enjoy these movies as much on the rewatch, considering I've seen them so many times, and I still did enjoy them. I think one of them I enjoyed more than the other though, and I think that there's a reason it's the number 1. So my number 2 Disney movie of all time goes to Tangled at number 2. So we've done a whole podcast on Tangled already. It was our 3rd episode of Fiery Friends with our friend Elizabeth, where we just went through the entire movie scene by scene because of the 10th anniversary of it. And I think that was really good, doing that with Dan and with Lily. So if you guys want to go back and listen to that episode, it's our 3rd episode of the podcast. And it goes into way, way, way more detail about why I love this film and why we all love this film. But just breaking it down to its basic elements, Rapunzel, best Disney princess, and it's not close. Like, she's hands down the best Disney princess in the entire Disney canon, by a long shot. She's so much fun. She's so lighthearted. She's so easy to relate to. The idea of having a dream is so good. The idea of being locked up but like wanting to get out there, so good. The idea of just like, not knowing what the world could be, but taking those bold steps to explore it, so good. The idea of having a dream but being scared for that dream to be realized, because when it is realized, what are you going to do next? So relatable. Like, I could go on forever about Rapunzel. She's my 2nd best MVP, right behind Vanellope from Ralph Breaks the Internet. So very, very, very strong, most valuable player in Rapunzel. I love her so much. And the storyline is great. Like, I honestly love Mother Gothel as a villain. I do think it's a little plot convenient how she shows up at so many random points and just happens to know exactly what to do. I think it's a little bit too convenient at some moments, but whatever, it is what it is. But I also think that this is like one of the best endings in any Disney film too, because like the first time you watch the movie Rapunzel, like you don't expect her to lose her hair. That is like, it's almost like Princess and the Frog, where they do a twist on the fairy tale and they both become frogs instead of both becoming human. Except like they literally cut off the hair of a character who is defined by her hair. And that's nuts. And she doesn't even get it back at the end. Like, it's actually gone at the end of the movie. She's actually a brunette with short hair at the end of the film, which is nuts. Like, the fact that they do that to their titular character is crazy and bold, and it's a step in Disney that they take that doesn't get undone. And you could say that, like, the death of Eugene gets undone. But there's a sacrifice for it. Like, she has to lose her hair. And so, like, there is something that changes because of the ending. Because, there's some scenes in other Disney movies where somebody dies at the end, and I feel like, and then they get resurrected, and it's not as heartfelt. But I think in this particular case, the resurrection really feels deserved because of the fact that something was lost. The fact that she had to lose her hair makes it feel okay that Eugene got to come back. And like, the Eugene and Rapunzel sacrificing themselves for one another at the very end is very relatable too. Like, it's kind of similar to like Baloo in the Jungle Book when he's making that sacrifice and almost dies, or like Gurgi in Black Cauldron when he almost dies. Except in this case, like both of them are almost dying. Like Rapunzel's about to sell herself as a slave for her entire life so Eugene can live. Eugene literally, like, you know, basically like refuses Rapunzel's healing power to cut her free so she can live. Both of them are trying to free the other with everything they are, and it's so heartfelt and it's so good and it's so well done. And when they, when he does come back to life, you feel like the love story is complete and perfect, and it's so good in every way. Then you have the songs of this movie are some of the best ever, with "I've Got a Dream" and "I See the Light" and "When Will My Life Begin." Those are some of the best songs in Disney history, hands down. It's just a film that I never get sick of. And then like the animation is especially good in the lantern scene. Like that lantern scene is one of the best Disney moments of all time, and there's nothing else that can be said about it. It's just so good. So for all those reasons, Tangled is my number 2. And then we move on to our number 1, which is Zootopia. Zootopia. Now this might be a hot take because I know Zootopia, it's a loved movie. I don't know how many people would put it as their favorite though, and I think that for me, it was my favorite by a decent margin. Like in my rankings, I was kind of between Tangled and Aladdin for that number 2 spot, but Zootopia was number 1 pretty clearly and far ahead of the pack because I think it has everything. It really does everything super duper well. The one thing you could say maybe it doesn't have as much as some of these other movies up here is the songs. They're not quite there. Like Try Everything is really good. It's not nearly like the musical masterpieces of Tangled or Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast or Little Mermaid. But I don't even think it needs the songs to carry the movie because it's such an incredible story of Judy and of Nick. And I think that what I like about it a lot, and what I also like about Tangled a lot, is both of those movies, they kind of pair a cynical protagonist and a dreamer protagonist. And I think that duo is basically like the duo that works the best for a movie, is to have one protagonist who's like cynical, views the world from more of a place of like, oh, okay, it's not that great because of the poor experiences they've had in Nick Wilde or in Eugene. And then you have the character who's a dreamer who believes that anything is possible in a character like Rapunzel, or in Judy Hopps, who's my number 3 MVP from all the movies, is Judy Hopps. But I think that Judy Hopps is a really good depiction of a dreamer, and then Nick Wilde is a really good depiction of a cynic. And both of them have very believable performances because Judy is going out and trying to do everything that, like, that a bunny should never be able to accomplish. Someone like her should never be able to be a police officer, but she does it. But then when she gets there, it's not everything she would imagine it would be. It's almost like, the idea of Rapunzel, when she's like, what if this dream happens and it's not everything I think it would be? That's kind of what happens to Judy Hopps. Is she gets this job of a cop, but then she's just doing parking tickets and people are yelling at her for giving them tickets, and it's not really this job that's fulfilling and making her feel like she's fulfilling her purpose in life. And then Nick is just talking down to her and saying like, yeah, you're just a dumb bunny, nobody cares what you did at the academy. And it's just like, wow, that's deep, that's heavy, that's real. And then you realize Nick is cynical because of his horrible experiences in life, which I can empathize with as well, because like things in my life have made me more cynical over the years. Like I definitely years ago was way more of a Judy in my life, but now I'm more of a Nick. Like I have more of a cynical view of different things because of the ways that I've been hurt over the years. And I empathize with that so deeply. And then like the scenes in the middle when things become about predators and prey, and like a lot of people look at that as like a racism depiction of like, okay, like all predators are like this. Like I've had that happen in my life, but not in a racist capacity, but more of a sexist capacity, where like people will say like all boys are like this, and they like reject friendship with me because they're assuming that because I'm a boy, I'm gonna be a certain way. And I think that's something that I really empathize with in a deep way in a lot of different situations in my life. So I can empathize with Nick being hurt by feeling like he's being stereotyped and why he's being put in this category of these harmful creatures, because I feel like I've been put in that category before. And then I also empathize with Judy, who's the one who hurt him, because there's been times where I've hurt friends by either putting them in categories or by just doing things to them unintentionally that hurt them, and it would like put wedges in our friendships, and just like that kind of stuff hit me so deep watching this movie for the first time and every time I watch it. And so like it emotionally connects with me in a way that puts it really high, but also like self-contained, the story is so good. Like even like taking out any personal connection that I have to the story, like it's so much better done than like, so there's like three main mystery movies in this tier list, and we have Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is my least favorite movie, The Great Mouse Detective, which is in my bad movies, and you have Zootopia, which is my number one movie. Like my number one movie and Ichabod and Mr. Toad both have mysteries with anthropomorphic animals. Like you have Mr. Toad's mystery in Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and yet it's my least favorite movie. And this movie is my favorite movie with his anthropomorphic animals in a mystery story, and yet it's done so much better. The story, the beats of it all make sense. Every location they go to is beautiful. Every piece of the puzzle connects. It has rewatchability value because you can see the pieces connecting more and more on the rewatch. Bellwether's a good twist villain. I don't think she's the best twist villain. Like I said, I think it's King Candy and Wreck-It Ralph. But I think she's a good enough twist villain, and she works well with the duo. You also have so many good quotes in this movie. Like it's called The Hustle, Sweetheart, or like Blood, 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 and Death, or like there's so many good quotes. Stuff about Dumb Bunny and Sly Fox, and then you have the sloth scene. The sloth scene always gets people as one of their favorite moments. You have the naked club where all the animals being naked. It's just like so many different pieces in this film work so well to the point where it is a masterpiece. There's a reason it's in the masterpiece tier, because it is a masterpiece. It is my favorite Disney film of all time. And it's a pretty new one too, which means that Disney can definitely still make films that top it. Like if you look at this top like 15, let's see, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them have been in like the last 10 years basically, or 6 of them. I don't know if Princess and the Frog was in the last 10 years, but and technically I guess Tangled wasn't either, because now it's 2021, but because that was 2010 I think. But whatever, what I'm saying is that like Disney's still making really good stuff. Most of these top movies are more recent ones. Some of them are classics. A lot of Renaissance is in here. Like 5 of my top 10 are from the Renaissance, with Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Tarzan, and The Lion King. So the Renaissance was great. The revival period was also great. And now we're entering this new era with Raya, which Raya is just outside my top 10. So I'm really thinking like Disney is on a hot streak lately. The movies have only been getting, maybe not better, but like they've been staying in this amazing masterpiece tier. Like the worst movie from the whole revival era was Winnie the Pooh. And it's in the Good But Something Missing. And same for Frozen 2. They're both in there. So like we haven't really had a bad movie since Chicken Little, and that's saying a lot. Like they're doing a lot of good stuff, and I'm excited to see what Disney has in the future. I know Encanto is supposed to come out later this year as the 60th Disney film, so we'll see where that one lands when it comes out. I have high hopes. I think it has the potential to maybe be amazing. I don't know if it'll be a masterpiece. That's a high bar to clear, but it could be. Who knows? But yeah, that's my list. I'm just gonna go through it one more time to let you guys know from bottom to top. So my unwatchable tier is Ichabod and Mr. Toad at 59, Saludos Amigos at 58. My bad tier is Dinosaur at 57, Make Mine Music at 56, Home on the Range at 55, Fun and Fancy Free at 54, Atlantis the Lost Empire at 53, Sword in the Stone at 52, Chicken Little at 51, Aristocats at 50, Fantasia at 49, and Great Mouse Detective at 48. My all right tier is Fantasia 2000 at 47, Rescuers Down Under at 46, Black Cauldron at 45, Brother Bear at 44, Melody Time at 43. My respectable tier is Sleeping Beauty at 42, Lady and the Tramp at 41, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at 40, Oliver and Company at 39, Rescuers at 38, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh at 37, The Three Caballeros at 36, Meet the Robinsons at 35, Bambi at 34, Pinocchio at 33. My Good But Something Missing tier is number 32, 101 Dalmatians, number 31, Winnie the Pooh 2011, number 30, Hercules, number 29, Frozen 2, number 28, Cinderella, number 27, Pocahontas, number 26, Dumbo. My great tier is number 25, Fox and the Hound, number 24, Alice in Wonderland, number 23, Peter Pan, number 22, Big Hero 6, number 21, Treasure Planet, number 20, Bolt. Then we have the amazing tier, number 19, Jungle Book, number 18, Moana, number 17, Robin Hood, number 16, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, number 15, Emperor's New Groove, number 14, Mulan, number 13, Ralph Breaks the Internet, number 12, Frozen, number 11, Raya and the Last Dragon, number 10, Princess and the Frog, and then you have our masterpiece tier with number 9, Lion King, number 8, Lilo and Stitch, number 7, Tarzan, number 6, The Little Mermaid, number 5, Beauty and the Beast, number 4, Wreck-It Ralph, number 3, Aladdin, number 2, Tangled, and number 1, my favorite Disney movie of all time, is Zootopia. So there you go. That is our rankings of the movies. I guess I'll also just go through the MVPs as well. So my lowest MVPs in the unwatchable tier are Ichabod at 59, Zini at 58, Arthur from Sword in the Stone at 57. Then my bad MVPs are Chicken Little at 56, Milo from Atlantis at 55, Grace from Home on the Range at 54, Pedro the Plane at 53, Gurgi at 52, and then Brutus the Centurion from Fantasia at 51. The all-right MVPs, we have Scat Cat at 50, Jake the Rat, the Australian Rat at 49, Donald Duck from Fantasia 2000 at 48, Donald Duck from The Three Caballeros at 47, Anna from Frozen 2 at 46, Tito from Oliver and Company at 45, and The Tramp at 44. Then respectable MVPs, I have Willie the Whale at 43, Mickey Mouse at 42, Prince Philip at 41, Thumper at 40, Kristoff from Frozen 1 at 39, Mike Yagubian from Meet the Robinsons at 38, and Tamatoa from Moana at 37. The Good But Something Missing MVPs, we have Baymax at 36, Meg from Hercules at 35, Tigger from the first Winnie the Pooh at 34, Ratigan from Great Mouse Detective at 33, Johnny Appleseed at 32, Melody Time, Pocahontas from Pocahontas at 31, Sitka from Brother Bear at 30, Roger Radcliffe from Dalmatians at 29, Todd from Fox and the Hound at 28. The great MVPs, I have the King from the Cinderella movie at 27, Mittens from Bolt at 26, Rafiki from Lion King at 25, Tigger from the second Winnie the Pooh movie at 24, Grumpy at 23, Kronk at 22, Jiminy Cricket at 21, and Esmeralda at 20. And my amazing MVPs, we have Timothy Q. Mouse at 19, Penny from The Rescuers at 18, Mulan at 17, Alice from Alice in Wonderland at 16, Ariel from Little Mermaid at 15, Captain Hook from Peter Pan at 14, Jimbo from Treasure Planet at 13, Prince Naveen, Princess and the Frog at 12, Baloo from Jungle Book at 11, and then my top 10 most valuable player characters from the movies, we have Raya from Raya and the Last Dragon at 10, Jane from Tarzan at 9, Robin Hood at 8, Belle from Beauty and the Beast at 7, Aladdin from Aladdin at 6, Nani from Lilo and Stitch at 5, Wreck-It Ralph from Wreck-It Ralph at 4, Judy from Zootopia at 3, Rapunzel from Tangled at 2, and then Vanellope von Schweetz from Ralph Breaks the Internet as my favorite most valuable player from the Disney canon. There we go. So 3 hours in, we've gone through all 59 movies, all 59 most valuable players, and ranked them from number 1 to number 59. If you've made it this far, I'm impressed. Hopefully I'll have a YouTube version of this too, where there'll be visuals so you can kind of like scroll between which movie you want to hear about the most. But we'll see if I'm able to create that and get that out for you guys. Even if nobody listens to this, though, I had a great time just watching through all these films. And you know, if you couldn't tell from just like my emotional excitement, especially like talking about the last few here, like, you know, like as I was going through like the bottom half of this list, like it was just kind of a struggle to talk about some of them because there's not as much there. But talking about like the masterpieces or the amazing films, like it gets me hyped because these films touch me in a deep way that really, really, really gets me excited. Because these movies have great messages, they have great stories, they have great gospel connections, and they're really overall a huge part of my life, and I'm really thankful that I had the chance to revisit them all in this journey. So all that being said, I in this next week will be in the process of reading a book because that's what the wheel landed on last Friday. Dan picked this book called Dream Big for me, which is gonna be fun, like as we were talking about with Rapunzel and that whole movie being about dreaming. So yeah, dreaming is a big component of relationship with God, and I'm glad that I get to read a book about dreaming big. It seems like a pretty good book from what I've heard about it, and it's only about 200 pages, so it shouldn't take me too much time to finish that by next Friday for the podcast, and then we'll be spinning the wheel again next Friday. So if you have any ideas for what to add to the wheel once we take something off, let me know, and I'll put it in the suggestion box. And yeah, Dan should be back in town next week as well. So I think that's about everything for today's show on my Disney rankings. So thank you for listening. It's funny I can talk for 3 hours and a half on my own on a podcast. Like, this is our longest episode, and I'm just here by myself. So it's pretty impressive. But it's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed.